Order. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this session of the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs Select Committee. We return again today to our ongoing thematic inquiry into the reforming of the water sector. We are joined again today by representatives from Thames Water. Welcome, gentlemen. Again, for the benefit of those following our proceedings and our own official record, can I invite you, please, to identify yourselves and your roles? Chris, perhaps.
Chris Weston, Chief Executive, Thames Water.
Adrian, Montague, the Chairman of Thames Water.
Ian Pearson, Independent Non-Executive Director and Chairman of the Remuneration Committee.
Okay. Well, good morning, gentlemen, and welcome to the committee. It's not that long, of course, since we had Chris and Sir Adrian with us previously. I thought perhaps just before we come to the detailed questioning, it might be helpful for everyone just to understand the purpose of what is a quite extraordinary session. We have taken evidence from no fewer than 10 water companies. Thames is the only company that we have felt it necessary to recall in this way. Initially, this was as a consequence of Sir Adrian writing to us indicating that last time around he had misspoken, putting inaccurate, in fact probably misleading information in front of the committee, something which came to light, we understand, as a result of an inquiry from the Guardian newspaper. Since then, though, you have provided significant amounts of information, which, candidly, I'm inclined to think we could have had earlier if there was a proper commitment to transparency from the company. We have requested board minutes regarding the KKR bid, which we still not received. There now appears to be a bit of dubiety around the actual figure spent on legal fees. It took us until 5:20 p.m. yesterday to receive from you a list of, as you term them, senior creditors. We note, and we may turn to this this morning and as far as we are able to, that you filed your report today with Ofwat. This is the last possible day for that to be done. Candidly, it feels to me, and I know that some of my colleagues share this view, that there's been quite a bit of game playing going on here. And I have to say, just looking at the whole evidence that we now have available to us, it's certainly not clear to me just in whose interests you are all working. So the purpose, I hope, is that by the end of today's session, we shall expect to have clarity on all the outstanding matters. If we do not have that clarity, then we reserve the right to return to it. As I have explained to you previously, as a committee of the House of Commons, we have formal powers which we have not yet invoked, but we may do so if that is necessary. So, Chris, let me ask you, first of all, as the Chief Executive, the culture of the company comes right from the top.
It does.
Why is transparency so difficult for Thames Water?
Could I just interject, sir?
Please do.
I'm making an apology. It's rare, as you said yourself, for water companies, for any company to be recalled to the committee. We regret that we have made that necessary. We have tried to be as forthcoming as we can without us now go into some of the reasons behind the actions we've taken. But I just wanted to say before we start, you're all busy people. I'm sorry that we're taking up your time again.
Well, look, we accept the apology. I don't think we're yet in a position where we are prepared to take things on trust from Thames. Hopefully, by the time we get to lunch today, we will be in that place. But let's just see how it goes. Chris, transparency.
I mean, transparency is absolutely something that comes from the top. I recognise I am the leader of the organisation and I set the tone from the top, and I am very clear in both my actions and also the direction that I give to the company that transparency is absolutely essential. And I think that in many instances, Thames is at the forefront of transparency. We were the first water company to publish all of our overflows online so everyone could see them. And I am very keen that we continue to make sure everything we do is transparent.
Mm-hmm. Not a particularly happy story this morning on overflows, is it? Your report indicates that you had too much rain leading to overflows a week before you put us all into a hosepipe ban.
I know, and I'm sorry about that, but the weather, I'm afraid, is a reason. It's not an excuse. Last winter, before we came into this spring, we had the second wettest winter on record. There were some months, like last September, where the rainfall was more than double the normal monthly rainfall. And our system, I'm afraid, was never intended to deal with that. We are taking huge steps to improve our position around pollutions. We are cleaning the network more than we ever have, and we are investing more than we ever have in our sewage treatment works. But it is going to take a while. I think the work that KKR done backs up the view that to turn around, transform this company is going to take between 5 and 10 years, maybe a bit more.
Now, to go back to the position in May, we discussed then your decision to proceed with KKR as a sole bidder. KKR have since left the playing field at the beginning of June, and you've now got an even shorter time frame. How do you feel now about the decision that you made to proceed with KKR as the sole bidder?
Perhaps I should take that. First of all, if I may, I'll explain how we have managed the process of looking at bids.
If we can keep it tight, explanations, please.
So, as is common in takeover situations, we created a special committee of the board. It has the unlovely acronym of ERSCO, the Equity Raise Subcommittee. And it was this committee that reviewed all the bids. At an earlier stage, long before KKR's withdrawal, we looked at all the propositions that were on the table. We felt that KKR's was by far the strongest. There were significant difficulties with, I think, all of the others. So we decided to go with KKR. We did that, I think it's fair to say, in the face of some unhappiness on the part of Ofwat that we were going to a single bidder as quickly.
Not just Ofwat. CKI, one of the bodies that you kicked out, felt that they were badly misrepresented and treated.
I don't think they've been represented, and I don't think they were badly treated. But we went
They
to...
were happy either.
Well, that may be true. But we went to KKR because they had by far the strongest bid, and because they said that really they wished to proceed on the basis that they were the sole preferred bidder. I know you have written to KKR. I don't know whether they replied, but they will account for that in their own words. And so we felt that in view of the fact that KKR was the strongest bidder, it was right to proceed in that way.
So now KKR have gone. How do you view the position?
Well, I think we're actually in a reasonably strong position. So we have...
Let's just get this right. You had two bids. You took the more expensive one at the expense of the cheaper one. The more expensive one has gone, and now you're left with a more expensive option still.
It was, well...
And that puts you in a stronger position.
There is a... we had a number of bids from industry players, KKR, CKR you referred to, altogether 5 or 6 bids. And then we always had the creditors providing competition to those bidders. The creditors are still advancing, they're in good shape. The proposition has been strengthened because KKR has shared their information with us and with the creditors. And we believe that the bid that is coming through from the creditors is very strong technically. They're exploring that with Ofwat. We hope that they will reach a conclusion with Ofwat very soon. And then it will be necessary to put that into a financial construct of how we reconstruct the capital of the company. But I think we're in reasonable shape.
Yeah, Mr. Carmichael, if I may, as a
please.
As a member of the Equity Raise Subcommittee as well, just to make the point that it really was a very clear distance between KKR and the second and third. And it was made very clear to us that KKR would not proceed any further unless they proceeded on an exclusive basis. And we frankly decided as a committee that we thought, although we wanted to maintain competitive tension, actually taking through the second and third bidders when they were so distant wouldn't have been in the best interests of the company. And we knew that we had a creditor-led proposal as well to keep the competitive tension that was required in the process.
And just to be clear, CKI did then want to come back in, didn't they? But you deemed that to be unprogressible.
Yeah, the situation was basically that KKR said they would only...
I mean, CKI are not a fly-by-night organisation. They're one of the world's biggest infrastructure companies. And they came up with something that was unprogressible.
CKI came up with a bid that was not as good by quite a long way as the KKR bid. And then KKR said that they demanded exclusivity if they were going to go further with the bid.
So,
you know, Ofwat would have liked us to carry on with KKR and CKI. We would have liked that as well, but the simple fact was it wasn't possible because KKR wouldn't proceed on that basis.
So they said jump, and you just said how high.
No, we had to make a choice. We had to make a choice.
Well,
do we rule out KKR and proceed with bids that are demonstrably inferior and therefore not likely to be in the best interest of the company, or do we agree to the exclusivity and proceed with KKR?
We've asked you for the board minutes in relation to this. So far, they have not been provided. So effectively, you're asking us to take this on trust from you. You'll understand the reasons why we are reluctant to do so. But Ian, do you want to tell us what it was that was so strong about the KKR bid, which makes it all the more inexplicable, surely, that they would have walked away from it?
Yeah. Well, KKR produced a very strong, detailed proposal that the economics of it was more compelling to the board and certainly to the ERSCO. And in the fullness of time, when we're not in the middle of a live transaction, I'm sure that we'd be very happy to provide further information. But when you just looked at the detail of the proposals that were produced by the bidders, there was very clearly only one winner here, and KKR was...
Well, I mean, you've lost your competitive tension now. KKR have gone. The preferred creditors, the Class A bondholders, are the only show in town now. They know everything. Everybody else knows anything. Where's the problem with releasing the information? Who loses?
Can I try to explain? There are, I think, essentially...
And perhaps, Sir Adrian, you might come back to the question I put to Mr. Pearson, which was what was so strong about the KKR bid? Yes. Because so far we've got it looked good and it was detailed.
No, I think it was better than that. So,
give me more.
As is usual in these circumstances, when you appoint a preferred bidder, there follows a period of due diligence, which allows the bidder to make more concrete his propositions and produce a final offer. There were 10 weeks of due diligence. KKR deployed an extraordinary number of resources. There were times where we had more than 100 people in our data room. So they learnt everything there was to learn about the business. And they produced a plan which, in the words of one of our commentators, was world-class. They understood the problems of the company and what needed to be done to resolve them. That's why their bid was exceptional. And when they withdrew, They confirmed to us, they didn't give us many reasons, they confirmed to us that they saw no financial or operational reason why they should not have been able to continue. I think you have asked them yourselves, according to the letter that you published, to give their own account of their reasons for withdrawing, and I wouldn't want to sort of take words out of their mouth. But I think there was something in there about the level of expectation and their worries as to whether they would be able to meet those expectations in time. So I think that all they told us on that fateful evening of the 2nd of June was that they were not in a position to proceed. And that's where it stands.
So, the decisions then in relation to the various bidders, and there have been others and other offers and notifications of interest. Who makes the decisions in relation to these? Is it the board?
No, well, ultimately it is the board. But as I said, we have established this equity raised subcommittee of the board, and we've done that both to erect a ring of secrecy around these propositions, because they have commercial information of great value to all the competitors.
Right. So who are the people on that board? We've heard you're a member and Mr. Pearson's a member.
Mr. Land is a member, who's the independent, senior independent director. Miss Lynn is a member. And then there are 3 observers. 2 observers who are experts on restructuring, Mr. De Bruyne and
Neil Robson.
Mr. Robson. And then Chris Weston is invited from time to time. But the proposition here is that this is a matter for the non-executive contingent of the board. But management is affected by these propositions, and so Chris attends when we invite him to.
We do, of course, have our professional advisors who attend these meetings as well, and who advise us on the bids and their views of the economics of them.
Mm-hmm. And which organisations do they represent then, the various participants?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that again?
Who's behind this?
Behind the committee? Well, it is the board who takes all the ultimate decisions.
Right.
I've no one but the board.
Look, we've made the formal request for the board minutes in relation to this. We will discuss as a committee later on what view we wish to take and what further steps. But can I just be quite clear about this? In the event that we invoke the formal powers that Parliament has given us, not to provide these minutes will be a contempt of Parliament. Is that understood?
We understand and respect the committee's powers. Perhaps I must take an instant, though, just to reiterate why we think it is inappropriate at this juncture to give these minutes. Firstly, they contain confidential information concerning all the bidders and all the bids, and we are subject to confidentiality undertakings with regard to that information. Secondly, we're also subject to market abuse regulations, which control the dissemination of material non-public information. And those are formal constraints. I think the most important point is the one that Ofwat has referred to in its letter. These are discussions at a very sensitive stage. There will come a time when all of these things are subject to review. Once we have a complete deal, of course, we have to secure the court's approval to it. But at the moment, there's lots of ebb and flow, and it will be really difficult to really counterproductive to release these documents. And we hope that the committee will understand and respect that position.
If that being the case, what was the purpose in you offering me as chair of the committee a private briefing? What were you going to tell me? But let me just be quite clear. There are no circumstances in which I, as chair of this committee, will take a briefing in private or that does not include the other members of this committee. I'm the chair, but we are all equal. You'll be familiar with the expression primus inter pares. That is my role here. So what What were you going to tell me in private?
I was going to tell you information that I thought you would share with the committee. I'm not seeking to marginalise the committee in any respect, but I thought that within the, away from the cameras, away from public forum, it would be easier for us to have a more detailed discussion.
Sounds a bit like a bit more game playing to my mind, I'm afraid.
I'm sorry.
However, we have a lot to get through. I am going to invite Charlie to lead us in the questioning of the collapse of the KKR bid.
Thank you, Chair.
Sorry. Yeah, sorry.
Sir Adrian, you just inferred to the Chair there that you were given no explanation as to why KKR withdrew the deal. There was obviously plenty of speculation at the time, spooked by government rhetoric, concerned about Thames assets being worse than they first thought them to be. Are we seriously expected to believe that you were given no explanation other than they were withdrawing the bid?
Yes, well, I'm afraid that is exactly what happened.
Okay, so did they submit a bid to Ofwat on the 30th of May?
They submitted, I think the right way, well, what we had was the best part of 1,000 pages from KKR. We've had the best part of 1,000 pages from Creditor. It is a very substantial piece of work. So they submitted a turnaround plan which looked at the commercial and operating characteristics of what they were trying to achieve. What they did not submit was the financial elements of the bid. And they said they could not do that because they had not achieved the full endorsement of their investment committee.
So in that 48 hours, they decided to pull the bid, having submitted most.
Having submitted all but the financial details.
There was nothing else that happened in that period of time that would have triggered.
You must ask KKR that. I don't believe there was.
On the day that they pulled out, the Class A creditors had a rival bid ready to go. I mean, an oven-ready deal, if you like. Somewhat fortuitous, would you not say?
I think the creditors were there, had always been there. They've always had, I think perhaps we need to go back and think about the creditors' position. So they are secured lenders to the company. The company's in default. We are kept alive by the creditors drip feeding liquidity into the company. They do have a great deal of contractual control over what happens in the company. They don't take the decisions, the board takes the decisions, but they do have a great deal of control. And I think they saw it as actually helpful, relevant to their position, to create an alternative proposition. That's what happened. It wasn't as, at that stage, I don't think it was, if you like, oven ready in the way that KKR's bid was oven ready, but it was very advanced.
Is there not some sort of conflict here where you've got a KKR bid on the table, and yet the people who are ultimately making this decision are also waiting in the wings to pounce?
Well, as I say, the people who want to make the decision on the board, the creditors, as I think we discussed with the High Court in the first restructuring plan, are essentially the economic owners of the business. They're not shareholders, they're not directors. It is the board that takes these decisions.
You can understand from the outside looking in that it seems to be a conflict.
I don't think it's a conflict. I think there are multiple interests. And when you get into one of these restructurings, I think that's what happens. Because the creditors are sort of in transit. You know, they know that when it comes to the restructuring plan, there are going to be huge write-offs. I mean, I think that they have quoted a figure of 10 billion or so. And that's an enormous loss for institutions that represent savers. So we mustn't forget that all of this money is actually savers' money. It's a desperate situation for the savers. And yet, they're also going to be the people who emerge as the future owners of the company. So there is a transition, if you like. I think a transition is a better word than a conflict.
I don't know whether, Mr. Weston, do you have a view on this as Chief Executive?
On the creditors?
Yeah.
So they started work quite a long time ago. They've supported the company for the last year or so. They've been providing financing to the company, which has allowed us to carry on investing to meet our legal, environmental and regulatory obligations. They have pulled together a comprehensive plan, as Sir Adrian has said, and they have shown, they have demonstrated their support for the company and their understanding for the company, and put forward a detailed proposal both to the company and to Ofwat. So I'm entirely comfortable with the operational plan that I am seeing from them. It makes an awful lot of sense, and it addresses what needs to be addressed in Thames to turn the company around.
Let them make progress.
Okay. Henry, your friend.
Can I just come back to this point about the minutes in terms of releasing them to the committee? Is it the case that effectively what's going on here is that you're refusing to release these minutes because they demonstrate that effectively there's a plan in a way that the Class A creditors have a preferential first dibs on Thames Water?
I don't think that's the case at all.
And the way that you've set up this bidding process means that effectively they get preferential treatment.
Well, if we look at can I tell you the history of this bidding process? Because I think this is quite important in terms of context. So it started last summer. Rothschilds on our behalf talked to more than 50 institutions around the world because they thought this is an unusual opportunity for brave bidders. You have to be a brave bidder to come to Thames, but it's an unusual opportunity. In February, in December we had 5 responses. In February we had a 6th. And that was the limit of the responses we had from the market. But all of those responses have been taken forward. They've all been adjudicated, and we came out concluding that KKR was the best. Now, KKR was also accepted and acceptable to the creditors. So had KKR taken this all the way, we would have found ourselves with KKR as a major shareholder and the creditors as a result of a debt for equity swap.
Why are you not being transparent about that process? That's the key thing here, isn't it? Because ultimately, we're sitting here, we're responsible for taxpayers' money, we're responsible for customers in respect of Thames Water. That's who we sit here in terms of representing our constituents. I think the onus is effectively that your buck stops with the creditors. Effectively, the argument is that you've created this situation whereby the creditors win at any price, and you're not willing to share any documentation as to the nature of the process that you've gone into in respect to the KKR bid that has collapsed.
We would say that our responsibilities are first and foremost to the customers and to the environment. Creditors are obviously in that rank of people for whom we have responsibility, but we're also trying to save this company from SAR. We may come back to special administration in due course. But I joined this company 2 years ago in the wake of the resignation of the chairman and the chief executive. We had a crisis. We have been living in crisis mode ever since. But we are trying to refinance this company and preserve it from special administration, which would be very bad for everybody. We'll perhaps come back to that.
Can I just add, so part of what we have to do to turn the company around and transform it is to restructure the balance sheet and reduce the gearing and the level of debt that is carried by the company. And there is a formal process that we are following. We've had one restructuring plan, which is overseen by the courts, and we will need to have another restructuring plan overseen by the courts to restructure the balance sheet. But to do that, you need 75% of the creditors to agree to that restructuring. So they have to have a role in what we are doing to turn around the whole company and get it back onto a firmer financial foundation so we can then go on and turn around the operations.
Helena.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to come back to the collapse of the KKR bid. So, Adrian, what day did you become aware that they were pulling out?
In the late afternoon of the 29th of June.
Friday?
Thursday evening.
Thursday evening. And was that a phone call?
I had a phone call from Rothschilds.
You had a phone call from who, sorry?
Rothschilds, our financial advisors.
And how did you feel at that moment? Because these are bidders that you've moved heaven and earth to pave the way for. You've let them proceed on an exclusive basis. You've found yourself in an extremely uncomfortable position in front of this select committee. How did you feel when they pulled out?
It was clearly a great disappointment. But, I mean, these things happen in life because no bid is sure until you've signed on the dotted line. And, you know, this is a situation which has enormous challenges.
You feel no angst towards them?
Of course not.
What do you judge of their assessment? Their official reasoning that they've given us is that they were worried about the political landscape in which they were entering in terms of Thames Water. But nothing has really changed in the political landscape between the general election last July and them pulling out. The Water Special Measures Bill is already on the statute books. The government made clear commitments in their manifesto. It doesn't really stack up, does it?
I think you have to ask KKR these questions, not me. I can tell you that all we were told on that evening of the 29th of May was that KKR had not been able to achieve the approval of their investment committee, and therefore they were unable to proceed. That is what they told us. They didn't provide any more colour. They've not provided to us any more colour. I think you may have been provided with more colour than we've had, but I don't know that for certain.
Ian, can I just check I heard you correctly there? Did you say our responsibilities to the environment?
Well,
I ask because one of the companies listed in the letter that you sent us yesterday at 5:20 p.m. is Elliott's. Now, these are the people who bought over BP and made them move out of renewables. Are you optimistic that they're going to treat Thames differently?
well, I
Is it
think
going to be good for the environment?
a huge difference between what they did in relation to BP, where I'm unaware of the circumstances.
Have you explored this with Elliott?
But where I'm unaware of the circumstances. And if you look at Thames, we have defined environmental obligations. We are struggling to fulfil them. One of the purposes of the turnaround plan is to put us in a better shape to fulfil
And
those
it's
obligations.
widely reported that the Class A creditors, senior creditors, will expect to be released from fines and environmental obligations if they're successful.
That is what has been reported. I believe that the discussions that they are having with Ofwat, which we are party to but not an integral part of, are aimed to try to identify how we can reprofile our expenditure in order to move back to compliance as quickly as possible.
I'm going to bring in two colleagues in a second, but one final question. Ultimate controller. It's a term of art used by Ofwat. Who is the ultimate controller of Thames Water today?
Ultimate controller, bizarrely, is still the original shareholders,
Who are no longer part of the picture.
who are not taking any active part, but they still own the shares in Kemble. And those shares are now under the management of Kemble's
You
lenders.
have no ultimate controller.
We have an ultimate controller, but he's not very active. I mean, you know, there is an
They
ultimate
don't
controller.
exist anymore. It's not very active. I can do the whole Monty Python dead parrot sketch for you if you want, but that is a controller that has ceased to be.
Accept that. I mean, we have no day-to-day contact with them. We have intermittent contact with them, but no day-to-day contact.
Okay, I've got Andrew and Sarah wanting to come in, and then we should move on.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on Helena's point about this now infamous telephone call. So you received this call, you put it down, your answer seems to be that you felt no emotion, no rancour. You simply put the phone down as though someone was telling you they're coming to clean your windows at 10 o'clock as opposed to 9 o'clock. It was a simple oops moment in life. Are you seriously expecting us to believe that as a board, you've had no conversation about what KKR's reasons will be? Now, you can keep telling us we should ask KKR. We can ask that. But you are the senior leadership of a major organisation which, in your own words, is in crisis. Are you seriously telling us you've had no conversation and have done no impact assessment or assessment from your own viewpoint? So my question is, in your words, what do you think went wrong?
I think they failed to get their investment committee approval because they were concerned that public expectation of what they would achieve would not be matched by what was possible in a reasonable time frame. So they withdrew. I mean, there have been press speculation that attributes different reasons to that. I know nothing about that. I have not had that direct conversation with KKR. I did have that telephone call. on the Thursday evening, and you know, it's a disappointment. I've had a long professional career. I've had lots of disappointments in that career. You don't get emotional about it. You try to take it as a fact. I took it as a fact.
And it didn't make any difference to the day-to-day running of the company. People were still focused on their day-to-day job, which is absolutely what I wanted. We have since then been through the due diligence reports that were produced and provided by KKR, and we've distilled those down to areas that we think we can further improve the performance of the company. So we are building that in now to the plans and operations of the company.
Do you think the public might just find the responses here just quite strange? It's whenever we discuss bonuses, whenever we discuss decisions the public may find strange or customers may find strange, you all turn into Sir Humphrey and give us the best, like as though you're passengers in this whole decision-making process. I find it extraordinary that you do not have any sense of urgency about solving this crisis.
Urgency. I think, let me take you through what's been happening. So ever since I arrived, this company has been in crisis. So we have had an abortive engagement with the original shareholders to provide new equity. We've had the draft determination. We've had the final determination. We've had interaction with the debt markets. We've had interaction with the creditor markets. We're thinking about a reference to the CMA. The pressure that the team is under is huge. Actually, there's no room for emotion. You put your head down and you get on with the job. And I think that that's what happens when you have a disappointment like KKR. You can't sort of wring your hands. You just have to move on.
I just wanted to clarify on some of the timings then, because I think when Charlie asked earlier on, you said that KKR had submitted their bid to Ofwat on the 30th of May, but you also said that you were aware of them potentially drawing out on the 29th of May, and then they didn't get the financing. So can I just clarify?
Well, what I know is I had a call on the late afternoon of the 29th. I'm not sure I can say from my personal knowledge when that bid was submitted. It was due to be submitted on the 30th. It may have been submitted on the 29th. I'm not precisely aware of that timing.
But either which way, you were aware of them putting out, but simultaneously they did put a bid in.
I was aware. I was aware that they had not been able to get their final investment committee sign-off. There was lots, I think, of interaction over the weekend to try to persuade them to continue, and they finally withdrew late on Monday evening.
Okay. And I just want to just very quickly on that point, because obviously as part of the due diligence, KKR would have been asking Thames Water a lot of questions, so they would have been seeking that comfort, so clearly you couldn't give them the comfort to be able to get that financial investment sign-off, because obviously I understand the banks, but sort of, Chris, I know you said we're working on this now, but sort of what more can you give them?
I wonder if Chris can describe the interactions we had with KKR leading up to their final decisions, because they were intense and long-lasting.
We did have a 10-week due diligence with them, extremely extensive and intrusive. It took a huge amount of time, hundreds of questions going into a lot of detail about the data that the company operates on. And so that was, I mean, very, very intense. And I think they got from that all the information that they needed to understand the assets and the operations of the company. And as they pulled out, they said there was nothing that they found in there that they didn't think was fixable or untoward. So I think that we came through the due diligence and as a company, its operations in relatively good shape.
I'll leave it there because I'll come back to that a bit later. But yeah.
Barney, you're going to talk us through the Thames financial timeline.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just picking up on the business with KKR, you know, the fact that you were surprised on the 29th of May, does that not indicate that you did not sufficiently question the level of approval that KKR had received from its investment committee, the fact that they were able to pull out at supposedly the last minute?
I think
was that not a fault on your part?
No, I don't believe so. The usual process that investors like KKR follow is that they have a preliminary investment approval that allows them to conduct this due diligence process, and produce the very detailed pack they would need to secure their final approval. I think this final approval was shared between the Europe and the United States, so it was a complicated process for them. But we had provided all the information they needed. We had been told, as Chris says, that there was no operational or financial reason why they could not pursue this. So,
but they didn't, and that means that their investment committee refused to sign it off for another reason. We're told because of the politics surrounding this and presumably the fact that the week before the fines had been announced and the glare of publicity. But that does rather suggest that you had not dug sufficiently into the approvals that they had received from the investment committee. But let me go on. Look, you released your financial results to March 25 today. You have a pre-tax loss of 1.776 billion. The liquidity is precarious, with 0.2 billion of cash and the 1.5 billion senior loan facility undrawn at March. But that requires credit waivers because of the court sanction and the appeal. So your liquidity is really pretty precarious. How's that compromising your ability to operate at an environmentally sensitive and acceptable level? What percentage of the investment required by Ofwat under PR24 have you actually managed to deliver, Mr. Weston?
It's not compromising our ability to invest in our assets on a day-to-day basis. It's not compromising our ability to plan and start projects that we have to deliver over the next 5 years.
What percentage of investment required by Ofwat have you so far managed to deliver?
It'll be a very small percentage. I don't know the exact number. We have invested probably 300 or 400 million pounds so far this year, maybe a bit more, out of what needs to be invested over the next 5 years, which is about 22 billion pounds. And we are ramping up to do that, and it is quite normal at this stage in this regulatory period that the investment number and percentage will be very low.
So at the moment, you're not keeping pace with PR24 and Ofwat's requirements?
No, I would not agree with that.
You wouldn't agree with that? Okay. Originally, you said you were targeting the new equity investment injection to be delivered immediately after the announcement of the final determination of PR24. Then it was after the court hearing on the restructuring plan. Then it was at the end of June. Now, here we are in July. There's still no sign of a viable investment plan at all this time. It's the customers that are suffering a failing service. So why have you got it so wrong for so long?
I don't know that we have got it wrong. The company continues...
Well, you made statements to this committee and publicly that these would be the points at which you had the investment plan come into effect. All of them so far have seemed to be wrong because it hasn't come into effect. You're now extending it to the end of the year, saying that it might be in place by that period. So what you've said so far has been wrong. I suppose what I'm asking you is why should this committee have any faith that by the end of the year it will be possible to do what so far it's been impossible to do?
So first of all, the operations of the company continue as normal, providing the service that we provide, and we continue to invest. And I think that's a very important starting point. Beyond that, when you look at the recapitalisation of the balance sheet, we absolutely had to have an FD, which landed on the 19th of December last year. And we needed that FD because it created certainty for potential investors around their investment in Thames Water. At the same time as we were running that equity process, we also had to run a restructuring process overseen by the courts that extended our liquidity and allowed us to bring in this super senior facility that created a firmer financial foundation that gives us liquidity if we draw on the first 1.5 billion to the end of this year, December. And that foundation, and I can talk about how we are drawing on that facility, but that foundation then allows a potential equity partner, and we've already discussed KKR, or the creditors to come up with a creditor-led plan. And they have been through due diligence to pull together that operational plan. And they are discussing with Ofwat the regulatory support they need to make Thames investable and turn it around.
But you know full well that the initial negotiation of that 3 billion was that it would come in 2 tranches. You were expecting to draw down the second 1.5 billion actually in June, in last month. But you've now said that the first tranche actually can last you until December. Why were those calculations so far out? Did the creditors create an artificial deadline for the second tranche in order to create a sense of urgency for a takeover proposal?
Well, they've certainly pushed all parties to create a sense of urgency to try and reach an agreement. That was what the June release...
Was it artificial, was my question? Was it an artificial deadline?
No, it's not an artificially generated deadline that is driven by the financing that they have put in place.
So were you telling the truth to this committee when you said that you expected to draw down the second tranche of that loan facility in June?
That was the best information that we had at the time, yes.
It was wrong.
Well, I mean, it's not always easy precisely forecasting cash flows.
But it might be if you were... look, you say that the business hasn't suffered any interruption of its normal process business. You've been able to, according to you, to meet the Ofwat requirements of PR24 and continue that investment programme in the normal way. So actually, given that you've said everything's tickety-boo, you've had no unseen events that would have made it... those projections of drawing down the 1.5 billion out of sync. But it is out of sync.
I don't want to give the impression everything is tickety-boo. The company is extremely stressed and within very difficult circumstances. I think I have said in the past to the committee that our finance function wasn't the most efficient or proficient, and that left us wanting in some areas. And I admit that our understanding of cash flows weren't what they needed to be. I am relieved that the financing that we put in place is lasting longer than we expected, because we are spending it as we need to spend it. We are probably a bit more efficient than we thought. Unfortunately, our headcount is a little bit lower than we want it to be. But all of that leads to the uncertainty of the reality of running a company and predicting what cash flows look like.
Adrian, the fact is, you're no longer in control of the process, are you? You've ceded that control to your super senior creditors. The equity injection is now in the hands of the bondholders. So let's examine those bondholders. What experience do they have of turning around the performance of a utility company? I mean, you're a year behind on AMP7. You're incurring penalties, presumably, on AMP8. Your lead investor appears to be Silver Point, a short-term debt investor who's trying to salvage their decision to buy Thames bonds, but has no operational management expertise and no commitment to stay for however long it takes to turn the company around.
We are going to come to some of this later, so if you maybe just keep
should we actually be talking to Tim Lavelle at Silver Point rather than you?
I'm sure he'll be delighted to come and account for himself. Look, the senior creditors are over 100 in number. Many of them are household names. They're insurance companies, they're pension funds, they're banks. There are special situation investors like the ones that you just referred to. But there's a mass of creditors there who have the interest in seeing Thames Water recover and survive. Now, in order to... all of those investors, the majority of those investors are unrestricted. They can trade their bonds because they're not party to any inside information. There is a group of them who we identified in the note I sent to the chairman last night. And incidentally, I think it's worth saying, the only reason that note was late was that each of the investors had to go through a clearance procedure before it was willing to have its name advertised to the committee. That was the reason it was late. We had hoped to do it on Friday. They brought together this representative group of institutions who are the people with whom we interface in financial discussions regarding the future of the company. They are represented by advisors, and day to day we work with the advisors rather than with this group of 15 institutions.
Fascinating, but not really an answer to my question. Look, KKR, you said, felt that they couldn't deliver what the public expectation was in a reasonable turnaround time. Yet KKR, you have told this committee, was a world-class bid with the expertise to do just that. And yet now you seem to be favouring a bid which is with people such as the chair has outlined and Silverpoint, who have no experience, no operational experience whatsoever, but who are known to operate in the credit markets in such a way that they buy up stock, they take a haircut, and walk away with the killing.
Barry, can we keep this tight? Because we are staying into stuff that we are going to come to later, given the chance.
How are they going to do it if KKR could not?
KKR could and would have done, but for their inability to achieve the approval of their investment committee. And we've talked a little bit about what I understand their reasons are. But
they said they couldn't deliver it in a reasonable time frame, what they believed the public expectation was. So my question to you is, how is it that you believe that this group, with no operational expertise, can?
Well, I think I must take issue with you on the fact that they have no operational expertise. These are, perhaps not the secondary debt traders, but you've got many very respected investors in infrastructure among these creditors. No, you can shake your head at me, Mr. Gardner, but it is nonetheless true.
The creditor's estimation of a time to turn the company around is 10 to 15 years, which is much like it was for KKR.
Right, I'm going to move on. Sarah.
Thank you very much, Chair. So just to be clear, sort of in the vein of transparency, I just want to look again just at these other bidders' offers. So you say that obviously the proposals from CKA and Castle were not progressible, but I just want to understand what was it that wasn't progressible?
Well, I think the way to answer that is just to take you through the sort of decision matrix that we have. So we're looking essentially for 5 things. We're looking for a detailed operational plan based on a thorough due diligence process. That is, they've really got to know the company, they understand the difficulties the company is going through, and they identify a way through it. Secondly, this company needs equity desperately badly, so a bidder must provide the right sort of equity. We've got a long period before all of this takes root, so we need an interim financing plan. At the moment, we're living off the super senior funding that the senior creditors put in place. Then we need an overall plan to get the company back to investment grade. At the moment, we're living on emergency facilities provided by the creditors. A long time ago, before Thames went into these difficulties, it was a highly regarded, sought-after issue of debt in capital markets. That was reflected in strong investment-grade ratings. We've lost those investment-grade ratings because of all the difficulties. We need to regain those investment-grade ratings and get back into the long-term debt markets. And then finally, we've got to have the support of the regulators and all our stakeholders. Those are the criteria that we have used to assess these bids.
And so where did those mainly fail? What was the sort of those 5? Because I'm sure the regulators might have been on side. I understand the future investment. Where was the weakness on the others? Because if KKR could...
I'm sure we could have progressed CKI as a bidder, as Mr. Carmichael rightly says. CKI is a very well recognised and reputable operator of.
There are other reasons why we might not want to, but on the face of the bid.
Yeah, but on the basis of the bid, the fact was that KKR's bid was superior, and they wanted exclusivity. So it wasn't possible to progress
Yes, and that,
CKR's bid any further.
and I sort of appreciate
while
that because
still
I completely understand that need for exclusivity. I think that's what KKR would want. They want that 10-week period. That's quite common in legal transactions. I've seen that before. What I don't quite understand is once that period ended, why didn't you just reopen it and give the other companies the opportunity to at least to improve their bid?
Well, we did have contact. We had contact with 3 bidders, 2 existing bidders and 1 new bidder. So the existing bidders, who were part of the adjudication we carried out in March, were Castle Water and CKI. And I mean, I think that the difficulty is capturing these assessments in a couple of sentences. In CKI's case, they had not done a great amount of detailed due diligence. It is quite true that they are recognised infrastructure investors in the UK. Indeed, they are an asset. They have an investment in another water company, so they know the sector. But they had not been through a detailed due diligence phase and did not.
They weren't allowed to because of the exclusivity.
No. They were treated in exactly the same way as KKR, leading up to the adjudication in March. They had all the opportunity they could possibly have wanted to do the work. And I think their financial projections were less favourable than KKR's. And it was much the same in the case of Castle Water. At that stage, they were not fully funded. I think they would tell you now that they are fully funded, but they have very little operational capability in water. And it's not just the financial propositions you need to look at, it is the overall appreciation of who is going to provide the best bid. In our case, it was clearly KKR.
Just to understand, you say they don't have operational sort of capacity in water, given that I think they own 75% of Northumbrian Water. What do you mean by that compared to the creditors?
I think I said that in relation to Castle Water.
Oh, sorry, right, fine. But in terms of if there really was like a true exclusivity period, then obviously, as Charlie mentioned, the creditors were primed and ready. So was it actually a true exclusivity period if they were primed and ready?
I think that the way we have described it, and I think the way that KKR describes it, is that they were the preferred bidder. It
would have been an exclusivity agreement signed,
around the time of the adjudication, there was a lot to talk about exclusivity. But then the point became apparent that we also had the creditors sitting in the wings, and therefore it was a preferred bidder rather than exclusivity.
Their exclusivity agreement had a carve-out for the creditors.
Right, okay, so
They expected them to sit alongside them and do their detailed due diligence at the same time KKR did. So when I was putting my management team and I was sitting down in front of KKR, very often they would either be in the room or there would be a separate meeting on particular aspects that they wanted to look at.
Can I ask how comparable is the bid now between what the creditors are now offering compared to what KKR were?
Well, I can only talk from an operational perspective, but the absolute amount they would invest is very similar to what KKR would put in place, and a lot of work has been done by management and by the creditors in distilling from KKR the best elements and building it into the new plan the creditors are putting in place. So there is a fair amount of similarity between the two now.
And can I ask, because you said that KKR shared information, so what information did they share, and was it their DD reports ultimately? Yeah. So they were quite happy with that being openly...
It was agreed beforehand that the creditors and the company would have access to all of that material. So it allowed us to look at how we target cleaning of our sewage network in a different way, and the value in cleaning more and cleaning differently. I mean, the technicality I don't think we need to go into, but that kind of insight will help us improve the performance of the company.
It doesn't feel like there's an open competition almost, because I appreciate that the creditors have always been waiting in the wings. They've been working basically in parallel with KKR. But on the other hand, you also say that the creditors, I think, so Adrian, you said have contractual control essentially over the company at the moment. So again, then there's these so there wasn't a true... I still don't think they're a preferred bidder, nor is there true competition now, because what I'm worried about, my concern is, as directors, you have a duty to act in the best interest of the company. Yeah. It sounds as though you're hamstrung by the financing terms, the fact that the creditors have you've said contractual control. Is this really the best bid? And is this the best bid?
The proposal that the creditors put forward, as at the same time as KKR pulled out, was completely independent of KKR and was different from KKR's bid. Since that time, we have spent time going through the KKR bid and how it was put together, and we've taken the best bits from it to build into the creditor plan. So it was developed independently and so did provide competitive tension. It provided an alternative for the board to look at.
We're into this same pattern. I mean, there's a course of conduct emerging here. You have decisions to make between various bids each time. Each time it seems that you make a decision that on the face of it is not logical, and you just tell us and expect us to accept that that was the best possible option. You won't produce the minutes for these decisions. You can see why I say it's difficult for us to be sure about whose interest you're pursuing and protecting here.
Well, I very much regret that should be the case.
Can I be clear?
We are enormously conscious of the gravity of the situation and the difficulty of finding a way through it. I mean, this has been an extraordinary period, and we are constantly considering what is the best interest of the company. And when you say the company here, it's a collection of interests. It is the customer interest, it is the environmental interest, there's a bit of political interest in there, but not a great deal, and it is the interests of the future owners and of the creditors. It's a very complicated set of issues to untangle and decide what the way forward is.
Look, we are aware of CKI, Castle, and there's been a third reported. I don't think it became as a formal bid, but an expression of interest or an offer from a company headed by Lord Redesdale. I think that's now in the public domain. Can I be quite clear about the dismissal of these three options? Were these dismissals all taken by the board? The decisions to dismiss? That's a yes. Can we get the minutes for these meetings?
I think I will need to take advice, because we just need to protect confidentiality the best we can. I can tell you that in the case of, we've talked quite a lot about Castle Water and CKI. In the case of Lord Redesdale's proposition, it's essentially one sheet of paper, not the 1,000 pages we receive from the other bidders. I think he regards it as a sort of outline concept.
These were board decisions.
These were decisions of my ERSCO, my Equity Raise Subcommittee, aka the board.
Right. Barry, are you wanting to come in? Because
Thank you, Chair. Just briefly.
Under pressure.
Absolutely. Look, the KKR bid would have needed creditors to agree it in a court vote on a restructuring plan. So creditors were effectively here negotiating terms. That's part 26A of the Companies Act. So there is clearly a conflict between creditors where they're bidding against other parties, especially where here we have a public interest in ensuring proper operational outcomes in terms of the environment and the accountability of what. Do you not accept that?
Well, I think it's no different from many other cases where secured creditors are taking control of a company. This happens on many occasions in public life, in commercial life.
So you do accept there was a conflict of interest?
I think that, as I said earlier on,
and the creditors were effectively negotiating terms with KKR.
There are many different interests at play here. We can't.
And they secured their own.
Well, I don't think that's correct, because all of these propositions require the support, in particular, of Ofwat. So the Ofwat represents the public interest as much as anybody.
Yes, indeed. I think Ofwat has a role to play in pulling the plug on this right now.
And they are in detailed discussion with us and with the creditors.
Right, I'm going to
About the way
bring
forward.
Sarah Bull back in here and then move on.
Yes, I'm just trying to understand as well, just in terms of when KKR shared that information, on what basis or what grounds did they share it? Because obviously they've incurred a huge financial cost.
Which information?
So you said about the due diligence reports, etc.
I think, to be honest, in the wake of their decision to withdraw, KKR have behaved honourably. So they said,
They weren't paid for it.
well, we paid for it, most of it.
Fine.
So we paid much of the due diligence cost. I don't think we paid it all, but we paid much of the due diligence cost. And therefore, they have made that information available to the company and to the creditors. And we are benefiting from it because they did a cracking job.
Yes, but they were obviously, but the creditors were also operating alongside, so they were also preparing their own bid alongside KKR. But equally, to have the information that KKR needed, they would have had to been speaking to the creditors to get the confirmation. So it's sort of like marking their own homework of a bid then that comes out.
They've had that information after with the withdrawal of KKR.
But also to get the information KKR, because of the loan structure and the funding, then actually the creditors are giving that information. So is there any chance that actually, well, I don't know, there could be questions raised about whether the comfort that KKR, they couldn't get that because the creditors wanted the bid ultimately.
I have heard no word of protest, no word of reservation from KKR. They were quite clear in saying to us they saw no financial or operational reason why their investment should not proceed.
I find this very difficult because it's incredibly serious to get to this stage after 10 weeks and
agree.
then not be able to get your finances over the board. That's very unusual
Their
at this
investment
stage.
committee.
Investment committee, but that's serious.
I agree.
And I don't
agree.
think that's just politics alone, if I'm being honest.
I agree. It was a great shock and a great disappointment.
I mean,
I think it was a
you've
great
been in the city for a long time. Have you ever seen corporate governance like this?
I don't think there's been another situation like Thames ever.
Well, Ian, you wanted to come in?
I was simply going to make the point that Mr. Carmichael, that I think there are a lot of people at KKR who were heavily involved with the bid over a number of weeks, who are deeply committed to it, and were very disappointed as well when their investment committee decided that it didn't want to support making a...
So not angry, just a bit
bid.
Disappointed. Sarah, we'll move on.
Thank you, Chair. If I could just take you back to the loan, 3 billion loan, obviously being split into two tranches. If you complete the equity raise process without requiring the full £3 billion pound loan, what obligations do you have on the remaining undertaken balance of that loan?
Well, the first 1.5 billion is committed, the second 1.5 is not committed. So the terms of the first 1.5 have been agreed, but as you go through the equity process, and there is likely to be a debt for equity swap, where the creditors will take the equity, they'll also look at refinancing the debt stack, including the super senior facility.
So are you obliged to draw down the balance?
No.
Okay. So did you borrow too much?
I mean, that's quite a difficult question to answer. No, we didn't. We negotiated an amount in two tranches. In fact, the second 1.5 billion splits into two tranches as well, of 750 each. We negotiated an amount that we thought gave us a stable foundation from which to complete the equity raise, and also to reach agreement with Ofwat over the regulatory conditions that would apply to us. The second tranche of 1.5 billion was there in case we went to the CMA and needed it, but the terms around it have yet to be agreed.
Okay, so it's accruing interest for its creditors.
The first 1.5 billion is, the second isn't.
Okay, so who's paying for that?
That's paid for by that facility.
Okay, so customers won't be paying for that.
Customers
Sorry,
won't
what
be
do you
paying.
mean that's paid for by that facility?
What is
The structure of the facility includes funding that allows you to pay for the interest and the consent fees and everything that goes with it. It's not paid for by customers.
Can I just drill down into that a little bit more? Can you just explain that to the committee, please?
Can I get a mortgage in these terms?
Yeah.
Again?
Can I get a mortgage in these terms? It pays itself.
I mean, it's a very complicated financial transaction. We have advisors who have more detail than I will have, but the consent fees, so fees are paid to the participants who are lending, who might underwrite that amount for the interest that is paid. All of that amount will be built into the facility itself, the debt itself, and it is paid out of the facility to pay those consent fees.
At no stage would this be filtered down to your customers?
Can I try it another way? I think it might be a good idea to try another way. So we get money from customers. 100% of that, without any condition or reservation, is applied to the operations of the company. But the money that we get from customers is not enough to meet all our investment requirements. We draw the balance from debt facilities, in good times from capital markets, in bad times from the super senior facility. But the super senior facility has an interest cost to it. We've got to pay that interest cost. The only way we can pay it is by drawing more amounts under the facility.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, but you've drawn down a full £3 billion loan. No. You haven't drawn down. You've drawn down half of that.
We've drawn down half of the first 1.5 billion.
Yeah.
In fact, it's not quite half yet because we've just had a third consent that will allow us to draw a bit more down that will see us through until about September.
Okay, thank you for that. I just now want to kind of go back into the creditors. We've already had Barry has already gone into a little bit of detail on that. But you've got your creditors now. We've got the list. That was given to us at 5 o'clock yesterday. Just to be absolute clarity, why was that only given to us at 5 o'clock yesterday?
Because each of the members of that committee, each of the 15 names that you've got there, needed to go through their own internal compliance processes in order to have consent to release their name to the committee. You may think it was quite long-winded. I wouldn't want to comment on that. We had hoped to do it on Friday. It didn't come through till yesterday.
So explain why that was. Why that process is necessary.
Well, I think each of the institutions has their own rules regarding the extent to which they appear on public record, and they just wanted to be sure they had to go through their processes internally.
Okay. You've also stated that the creditors have a strong track record of helping complex businesses grow through committed capital and long-term stewardship. Can you just explain a little bit more about what that record actually is, and can you share some of the examples of companies that they've helped grow?
No, not off the top of my head, I can't. I mean, I'm very happy to write to you on that. It's really a question for the creditors rather than for me, but I'll do my best to answer it.
And thank you. Can you just explain the due diligence that you've done in regard to these creditors?
Well, the creditors are lenders of record. They have been there, many of them, for many years. And so there will probably have been due diligence done at the start when the loans were taking on.
Probably.
Well, it's not, honestly, it's not customary in the market to do due diligence on your lenders. They are the people who provide the liquidity to keep the company's operations running. And in good times, that's regarded as the right approach. I mean, you do have checks on bona fides, but you don't necessarily look at their record in terms of how they will behave if the loan went bad.
But the chair has already picked up on the of Elliott being one of those creditors and worryingly acquired BP and then obviously has pushed for the offloading of renewable businesses. Surely there should have been some proper due diligence done on that basis.
But, I mean, some of these creditors will have bought the debt in the market. That is not a transaction that involves the company at all. I don't know what the position is as regards Elliott. But some of them
I'm now wanting to move into a different role, though. But as you've told us already, you can do due diligence, but frankly, it's going to make no difference. They control you anyway.
Yeah. When you take on the debt in the first place, you assume that you take on debt in the ordinary course. You approach a syndicate of lenders. A bona fides is essentially reflected in their willingness to make loans. I mean, you do checks on money laundering and all that sort of routine governance, but their bona fides is represented by their willingness to lend you money. And no one, when you take on debt in an ordinary, well-operating company, you don't say what's going to happen if this company runs into difficulty, because that is not the plan, that is not the intention, that is not the outcome you seek. You're just asking, are these chaps good for the money?
Yeah, sorry I interrupted you.
Yeah, that's fine. There's such a huge number of businesses involved here. Do you feel that a consortium of over 100 anonymous, well, not anonymous now because we've got the 15 here, but there obviously are others, but we've got all of these companies ranging from pension funds to activist investors, there's the Royal Canada Bank in that list as well. Do you think that they can effectively exert long-term collective stewardship?
They won't. They will appoint a board of directors. We don't know what their intentions are regarding the appointment of directors. There is a discussion, I understand, underway with Ofwat to work out what sort of governance structure Ofwat would like to see these very special situation lenders have in place. But their control will be exercised through the board. And I think this is something probably you need to discuss with Ofwat, because it's their discussion at the moment.
Yeah, just moving on from that.
I could just make one point as well, that when we're looking at these 100 institutions, these are the institutions that you'll find in the share cap table of pretty much all the publicly quoted utilities, and they don't seem to have a problem, whether it's Centrica, whether it's Severn Trent, in terms of having acceptable governance arrangements. So I don't think it's beyond.
Don't think other water companies have problems.
But now I'm saying these same investors
have invested in other companies.
Have invested in other
that
water
are in
companies.
exactly the same position, or on the way to being put in.
And so, to that extent, it's not that different to the situation with Thames.
I'm interested in transparency here. We hear that we don't think it's going to be much different, or there shouldn't be a problem. But we've had the promise of enhanced transparency, and you've used the word amongst you a number of times today. What does this look like compared to the current situation? And is this an admission that Thames has not been appropriately transparent up until now?
I don't think so. I mean, I think as the chairman said, it's instructive to compare the position of the listed water companies. So 3 of the water companies are listed on the stock exchange. They probably have hundreds of thousands of individual investors. You don't know much about any one or more of those individual investors. The large holders have to declare their holdings. I can't now remember it's 3 or 5%, but the large holders need to declare their holdings. The others are not publicly recognised or available. That's the way the system works for the big listed companies. Now, I think after we've gone through this process and we have restructured the balance sheet, and some of these lenders have exchanged their debt for equity, it will be the same position as it will be for one of the big listed water companies. There will be a mass of shareholders, many of whom will not be known to the public because their shareholdings have not reached the level where compulsory disclosure is required. So that even in the listed markets, beneath the threshold for mandatory disclosure, you don't publicly know who the shareholders are. The company will, because it looks at the register. But out there, people look wide yonder, there's no real knowledge of who their shareholders are.
Will you, just final point there, will you pledge to ensure that we do receive this enhanced transparency? I mean, getting this list of creditors after being pushed on that for some time is absolutely important.
To be fair, the chairman wrote to me, I believe, last Tuesday or Wednesday. We jumped to it. We asked the creditors, or the committee, for their agreement to disclose their names. This is not something you do every day.
We got there eventually.
It's something you do every day. And so we push them gently.
your pledge for better transparency going forward.
We're making heavy weather here, but I'm going
Thank
to
you.
stick with this until we're through it. Jane, were you wanting to look at... You're okay. In which case, Henry, we'll move on to you and the creditor's plans.
In terms of the plans, I don't think there's been a commitment in respect of dividend payments, and there's been a hint at public listing. What's the plan to get a return on investment for the creditors?
Yep. So the creditors have said that they're not expecting any dividend payments while they're owning the company. Their intention, as I understand it, is to IPO the company at some point in the future, and that is where they'll make their return.
Yeah. Sorry, say that last.
And so the dividends that they could have taken will be reinvested back in the company to improve its performance. And then the return will be generated on their exit when they, if there's some time off in the future, when they list the company. That is the intention at the moment, as I understand it.
So is there intention to inject fresh equity?
Yes.
Okay. And what about exchange for debt?
There will be a debt for equity swap. The precise details and shape of that have yet to land because they're going through their discussions with Ofwat, and they need to understand what the regulatory conditions will be, because that will inform what the financial structure looks like. And when they get that, then we'll know exactly how much equity is going in and how much debt will be written off.
The creditors did put out a press release a few weeks ago in which they said they expected to inject £3 billion of equity to secure £2 billion more of fresh lending to the company, and the total value of the package was likely to, they said 17 billion, not quite sure how they got that figure, but a large amount. And the balance between new funds injected as equity or as debt is in the write-off of some of the existing lending, because the ambition that everybody has is after the transaction has been completed, we'll reduce the gearing level in the company to under 60% or under. And that can only be done when you have new equity by reducing the amount of the debt. So the debt will be written off. That is all part of the court process that we're hoping to come to later in the year, or perhaps at the beginning of next year.
I think your documents describe it as a material write-down in respect to the debt. I wonder whether it's a better or worse deal for Thames than write-downs offered by KKR or other bidders.
I think we had not got to that stage. We have not got to that stage with any bidder. We didn't get to that stage with KKR. Haven't got to that stage with the creditors.
Well, we don't really know what stage you got to with KKR because you won't release the board minutes and then you won't release the minutes in respect of on the other. So there's a lack of transparency, isn't there?
No, I don't think there's a lack of transparency. I think it just reflects the situation that we are in at the moment. KKR put forward, or did not put forward, a formal offer in the end, but that offer would have been caveated. They would have had to agree the financing with both the creditors, and they will have had to agree a regulatory regime that was applicable to Thames with the regulator. And once all that was in place, then you would have certainty over what the balance sheet would look like. It would involve a haircut, but we didn't get to that point in the process. So the process is now continuing with the creditors.
Is it a better or worse proposal than the one offered by KKR?
As I said, we can't judge the final structure of the company because KKR didn't get that far.
So the Class A creditors, their bid is going to raise £2 billion more of debt. So, do you think that more debt's the solution?
Bear in mind, that is new debt. The issue is what happens to the old debt. And under this court process that we're envisaging, contemplating for the end of the year, much of the old debt will be written off. So you have got, if you think about the capital structure of Thames in the debt side, right at the top you've got the super senior advances that we're now receiving from the creditors. Then you have something called the swaps, the tranche of money that the banks have provided for swaps. Then you have the 15 billion or so of A lending. Then you've got $1 billion of B loans. The B creditors, I think, have been in contact with the committee in the past. And then underneath that, you've got some debt due to the parent company. We don't know yet how much of that debt will be written off. But if the creditors are right in saying that they are going to provide 5 billion of new money, but the value of their package is worth 17 billion, you think that they're expecting a write-off of a huge amount of the existing debt. We haven't got to that stage yet, but that's why we say there's going to be a material impairment of the existing loans.
You can't give a figure as to how much debt there will be on day one.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Oh, yeah, no.
But the aspiration is to reduce our overall gearing level to beneath 60%, which is where Ofwat, I think, want to see it. So this is a huge, bitter pill for the lenders to swallow.
Just you raised it yourself earlier about the subject of special administration. You're not particularly keen on it as an option. But from the point of view of the taxpayer, how much do you think it would cost?
Well, I mean, I think there's a feeling in some quarters that special administration is sort of a silver bullet, wipes everything clean.
And how much do you think it would cost the taxpayer?
Well, I think that the estimate that Teneo, the expert retained in the first set of court proceedings, had was 3.5 billion, I believe. I think I gave a slightly larger figure in the first hearing.
Can you reconcile that with the report presented by Teneo to the High Court?
I think it comes from that figure comes from.
They conclude that it would the government would recoup 100% of the funding.
Government probably might well recoup 100% of the funding, because the government would come in right on top of that stack of debts. Mm-hmm. But I think the point is, if they aspire to sell Thames Water to another bidder, to a bidder they find, then we'll have to go through the same process of due diligence, same process of environmental risk assessment, same process of sorting out the creditors.
But so at the end of it,
the government may be in a reasonable shape, but all the problems that we're dealing with now will have to be dealt with again in the context of a special administration.
Just on the question of loans being written off, your report this morning, a loan to your own parent company written off. Talk us through that.
Yeah, so
that was 1.271.
Yeah, so nearly 1.3 billion pounds. That was a loan that was provided by the operating company, TWL, to our parents, TWUHL. That loan was then provided onwards to Macquarie in 2007 to help refinance the acquisition of Thames. So it was a long, long time ago, and that was endorsed by Ofwat at the time. Long time ago, and we have taken the view, having looked at it, that it is not going to be repaid.
It's unrecoverable.
It's unrecoverable, so we have written it off. It doesn't affect the operations of the cash flow of the company at the moment.
It increases your level of debt.
It doesn't increase the level of debt, no.
What is the impact of it then?
The debt, there is no impact. We're just never going to recover that loan.
Right. But just to come back to the question of SAR for a second, you think that Teneo, in their assessment, that there would be a cash neutral effect to the taxpayer is actually correct?
I think that is unclear. I know that is what was said in the report.
What do you think it would be then?
Well, there are many uncertainties around special administration. I think in that report, Teneo made clear assumptions about things like how long the special administration would last for, and the government's ability to recover all of the costs that were incurred during that period. Those are not absolute certainties.
Secretary of State thinks it would be recovered. He wrote to us on the 25th of June, I quote, "We expect that any government funding required during a SAR would be recouped after the conclusion of the administration."
I accept there is a good chance it could be recovered. But the SAR could also go on for a lot longer. We don't know how long it is going to go on for. And to get out of SAR, if you put it back into the public markets, we will have to go through an equity raise process. There will have to be an agreement with the creditors as well. There will have to be an RP process. And I would expect the new equity provider to go through the process that we're going through now, trying to reach an agreement with the regulator as well.
I mean, it comes back to my concern about whose interest are you serving here. You know, the SAR gets presented in the worst possible light, as does CKI, KKR, everybody else, but the Class A bondholders don't seem to get the equivalent treatment.
Our objective has always been, since the day I joined this company, to recapitalise the company and bring it back to financial health. That's always been our objective. KKR's withdrawal was a disappointment. We've described why it is that the other bids were unsatisfactory. The creditors are making reasonable progress with their proposition, and when that comes to fruition, we will have succeeded to recapitalise this company. It will be on the verge of a turnaround. That is a real achievement.
Well now, real achievement. Regulatory leniency. Helena.
Thank you, Chair. Chris, you've spoken extensively about how Thames have this requirement for a regulatory reset, by which you mean you're asking the regulator to write off fines and not apply those fines to Thames Water. You say you've had discussions with Ofwat about this. Have you or anyone acting on behalf of Thames Water lobbied anyone else about writing off fines?
So the company, I think, to turn around this company and to get it performing properly, there needs to be a recognition of the reality of the situation.
Yeah, I'm not asking you the reasoning, I'm asking you if you've lobbied anyone else besides Ofwat or anyone acting on behalf of Thames. We can come on to the reasoning in a minute.
Okay, so we've talked to Ofwat about it, we've talked to the EA about it, and we have talked to DEFRA about it.
Just DEFRA, no other parts of government?
Well, if there are other ones, then I apologise for the oversight.
We have periodic meetings with an oversight group, which also includes the Treasury and UK government investments.
So have you written to any ministers outside of DEFRA to ask to be let off the hook from fines?
No. Not that I'm aware of.
No.
Okay. Many people, many taxpayers will find it extraordinary that Thames Water wants a special exception. They want to be let off the hook from £1.4 billion of fines. Why should you get a special exception?
I don't recognise 1.4 billion of fines. Where's that?
That's the estimation of figures that you provided in your evidence to us over the next few years.
So as we go into
both the EA fines and the Ofwat fines.
As we go into AMP8, our estimation of the cost of providing the infrastructure that we need to in AMP8 is about 24 billion. The FD that we were given was just over 20 billion, so a 4 billion shortfall. So that money needs to come from somewhere. At the same time, over the next 5 years, we will improve the operational performance of the company. But the operational performance of the company will not meet the targets that were set by Ofwat, which will lead to penalties of about, we estimate at the moment, £1 billion. So that 4 billion overspend and the £1 billion of penalties has to be borne somehow. And if we don't reset the performance, well, the equations don't add up. You couldn't do it.
Why do you think you deserve a special exception to fines that every other water company has to comply with?
So we're not.
How would you justify that to bill payers, to our constituents?
Well, I don't think we're pleading special circumstances just.
You're asking for fines to be written off.
Just for Thames. I think there are shortcomings in the regulatory regime, and the regulatory regime, as you know, is being looked at by Sir John Cunliffe. And I think part of what the regulatory regime needs is a turnaround regime that allows companies like Thames, and there may be other companies that struggle like Thames, to go into this particular area of the regulatory market and turn themselves round for the benefit of our customers and the environment. So if we do it, it would be available for anyone else that finds themselves in a similar circumstance.
You're asking for all water companies to be let off fines.
No, I'm not asking. No.
I think it might be helpful if we distinguish between fines and what are called output delivery incentives and the regime that Ofwat has, and they're very, very different. Basically, the way the economic regulatory model works with Ofwat at the moment is it sets us a number of targets, and
you're only allowed to raise bills on the basis of meeting those targets.
Well, let me explain how the target system works, and then hopefully that will answer your question. But Ofwat sets us a whole range of targets from leakage to interruptions, right across the board. It sets these targets in a way that if you overachieve your target, you'll get a reward, and if you underachieve your target, you'll get a penalty. It isn't really a fine, it's a penalty, but it is money that, in effect, is lost to the business. And the problem is, and why some people have called it a doom loop, is that if you continually underperform, you're given less and less money to achieve higher and higher targets. And we don't think that's really very sensible, particularly for a company in Thames's circumstances when it has been struggling for a number of years. And I think when you look at the interim report of Sir John Cunliffe, he was also, I think, quite critical of the performance incentive regime. And one of his interim recommendations was he wanted to see something that was more related to the actual water company rather than a notional economic model of an econometric model of a water company. And I think that will be an important reform that hopefully you'll look at as a committee and we will see in legislation in the future.
Whether we're talking about fines or penalties is slightly besides the point here. Thames is asking for a carve-out. It's asking to be let off the hook for penalties or fines that it is due, and people will find it very hard to understand why you should be given that exception. It appears you're also calling for that for the entire industry. But are you not holding a gun to the government?
I don't think that's what we're doing as Thames, actually.
Ian, can you let me finish?
Sure.
Is Thames not effectively holding a gun to the government and the taxpayer's head? It's basically saying, you've got to let us off these fines or you'll have a special administration regime.
We are reflecting the reality of the situation. We are trying to fix the situation.
Is that a yes or a no, Chris?
So we're trying to get the right financial foundation in place. We also have to turn around the operations, and the two are symbiotic. You can't separate the two.
Is it not fair to ask your creditors to take a bigger haircut and not ask the taxpayer, the country, to let you off the hook on £1 billion of fines?
I don't think that is sustainable. I don't think you would get to a sustainable solution for the companies.
You don't think it's sustainable? We're talking about a £17 billion deal here, and we're talking about between 1 and 1.4 billion.
I mean, if the right conditions around that deal that allow for a reset to happen, then you will get to a sustainable solution for Thames, which would be a good outcome for our customers and for the environment. It is reflecting the reality of the situation. We are suggesting a reset because there isn't really an alternative.
Thames is lobbying government for smaller haircut for its creditors and being let off these fines. That is quite clear. And you've also said...
No, we're not, actually. And there is a difference. Some of our creditors may be requesting regulatory easements, as they call them.
Can you keep your voice up, please?
Can you define regulatory easements? We're talking about fines being cancelled.
Some of our creditors have been asking for regulatory easements, and they take the view that previous fines should be one of those easements. I'm not aware that that's a decision that we've taken as a board to be let off fines. What we do think as a board, however, is that the performance regime that Ofwat has in place doesn't work for a company in transformation.
You've spoken about that. And that will be in your submissions to the Water Commission. But
it's penalties.
You haven't taken that
fines
as a board.
If you get what we're saying.
Okay, if you can just keep the question and the answer.
If you haven't taken that decision as a board, why are you lobbying the government for that as Thames Water?
We're not lobbying the government
or is it the
to be let off fines.
The creditors who are lobbying the government.
It would perhaps be helpful to go back to the basics here, because we got a final determination that broadly suggested £20 billion of funding to Thames for the next 5 years. Our proposition had been, please can we have £24 billion, because that's what we think we need to help restore the company to compliance and avoid future fines. Now, the discussion is whether we can respect, or the creditors and us can respect, the £20 billion final determination, recognising that we're going to need to profile the work differently and we won't achieve compliance as quickly.
Yeah,
That will involve penalties, and therefore we've got to have an understanding with the regulator as to how these penalties are dealt with.
You've said in your accounts that were published this morning that you expect this will take 10 years to fix sewage dumping in Thames. Are you asking to be let off the hook for 10 years as part of this regulatory reset?
Just to make one very important point, not the Thames, because the Thames Tideway has transformed the level of sewage in the Thames. We're saving 95% of the sewage emissions now in the Thames. That is the product of a super piece of investment. The problem is in the 350-odd small works outside London.
Yeah.
So in the Thames Valley.
I think the people who live outside London will probably feel they're quite important and essential
I'm sure
to
they
fix
do.
those too.
But
can you answer the question, Adrian? You've said in your accounts today you think this will take 10 years to fix. Is it therefore correct to say that Thames is lobbying Ofwat and the government to be let off fines for 10 years?
So we are trying to find a pragmatic solution. If we don't find a solution to it, then there is a good chance that we will go into SAR. If an investor came into Thames under the current regulatory regime, they would have to be prepared to accept those penalties and fines. They would have to be prepared to do that. I would imagine that they would find that a disincentive for investing in and supporting Thames, and so wouldn't do it.
Just to be really clear, you are asking on behalf of your creditors to be let off the penalties for not doing the investments you've promised you'll do as part of price reviews. That's what you're asking. So how is that going to fix the problem?
I don't think that's correct.
If you're asking for carves out to the rules that have said you need to fix certain pipes by certain deadlines, how is that going to fix those pipes any quicker?
We think it would cost us around 24 billion to fix the pipes and invest in our sewage treatment works. That is what is needed. In doing so, you would incur penalties of about £1 billion. Those penalties somehow have to be paid for.
Why don't you just get the extra from the creditors? Why don't they just take a bigger haircut?
Well, they have to pay. It is a capital market, and they have to see a way to a return. Otherwise,
making a return, it would just be less.
Otherwise, they won't invest.
And don't forget, forgiving debt does not create cash. It reduces liabilities. What we need is cash to run the business.
We don't actually know that they wouldn't invest because you've been very limited in the bids that you've proceeded with. It hasn't been an open process with others who wanted to take part in the process. So I just don't think this stacks up.
It has been an open process. We went to 50 organisations around the world. Anyone could have put in a bid. The B shareholders at some stage...
You went to exclusivity.
We've just spent an hour outlining that process, and we're not going to go back into it now, but it was
This
very
committee told you
unclear
not to.
how you decided to
look,
proceed.
can we just keep a bit of order here, please? Helena's got asking. Sorry, carry on.
Back to you,
Are you
Chair.
done?
Yep.
Ian, it's not that long since you would have been qualified to sit on this side of the table.
Absolutely.
If you were still going home on a Thursday to Dudley Waste, how would you explain to your former constituents what you are trying to persuade us of today?
Yeah. Well, to be honest, Mr. Michael, I wouldn't have any problem at all in explaining to my constituents what's going on, because I think we're doing the right thing here in very difficult circumstances, looking at probably the biggest recapitalisation in UK corporate history, if not European corporate history. And these are complicated matters, and what I've tried to do on my time on the board...
People who are seeing outages not being fixed want to go swimming in rivers that are not clean. You just say to them, it's just, forgive the term, suck it up.
No, I wouldn't say that.
Have you always taken this?
I mean, what I would say to you, in all honesty, is that this is a company that has been struggling and performance hasn't been what it should have been. And there are a number of reasons for that. One reason might be that too much money was taken out of the company in the past, but that certainly hasn't been true for the last 8 or more years. Another reason might be that in PR19 and actually in PR14, the regulator didn't give the company the money it said it needed to be able to keep its assets in good order. So we started the PR19 process with basically saying we were going to spend £1.5 billion more than we thought than the final determination. And we have actually done that, and our previous owners put their hands in their pockets and funded the business. And yes, performance needs to be better, but that's what Chris and the team are working on. And we are seeing, I think, some promising signs that performance is getting to a better place. As the annual report published today shows, in a number of areas we've got our best in AMP performance. But must we do better? Yes, of course. See,
the advantage that Barry and I have is that of longevity. And we do remember you as a minister. You had a fine turn of phrase. Can you remind me what you said about Ryanair when you were a minister?
Ryanair.
Yeah, I can. I accuse them in the context of climate change as being the unacceptable face of capitalism.
I think it was the irresponsible face of capitalism, wasn't it?
Well, I think unacceptable face of
Applying
capitalism.
the same standards to Thames today and the same analysis, how would you characterise them? Completely differently, actually. So there's nothing irresponsible in companies wanting to be let off fines and easements, even though their performance is poor, their focus is on debt, not on customer service. That's different. That's responsible. We have a very responsible board that takes its directors' duties seriously. Okay. We're in a very difficult financial situation. There's no doubt of that. Our creditors are having discussions with government about a funding model, and we're trying to do the best we can here in very difficult circumstances, and to achieve a recapitalisation of the business, which, as Adrian says, we're quite well advanced in discussions about being able to secure. Right. Sarah, you wanted to come back in and then we move on.
Very quick question, thank you, Chair. I understand your explanation about the penalties and the doom loop, but did the KKR bid include paying those penalties? And are the creditors prepared, have they built in as part of their bid paying these penalties?
Both the KKR bid and the creditor bid see the need for a regulatory reset.
But they haven't built in. So they want the reset. So it was always going to. So it's possibly always going to fail. Either which way, they're going to fail unless you can get that.
KKR would have, and so do the creditors. And my understanding, although I don't have the same visibility as Adrian, is that some of the other entities would have also required the same.
But I thought there was no financial reason why they said that they couldn't proceed with this. So their bid was always contingent on that fine. So they had to be waived. Otherwise, this was never going to happen.
It had to be reset, not waived.
Oh.
Let's see how many angels we can get in the head of the pin then. The difference?
So can I take an example? So our performance for leakage at the end of the last year was 569 megalitres per day. The performance target for the end of AMP 8 was 408 as set by Ofwat. The reality of the situation is we are not going to get anywhere near that. And the more we fall short, the larger the penalty is that we incur. Mm-hmm. So you need to put in place a stretching target that reflects the reality and performance of the company that continues to see improvement. So we're not saying we shouldn't improve, and it shouldn't be a stretching target, but it needs to be in the bounds of reality.
And taking a reconstruction from the most expensive option is going to help that. How?
It is the operational plan that they put forward and KKR put forward would have seen leakage improve over that 5-year period because of the investment that they were making in it. And same with the management plan that's in place now.
Okay, we come to everybody's favourite subject, management retention plan.
Yes.
Jane, you lead our questioning.
Thank you very much, Chair. So yes, management retention plans or bonuses. Just to set the scene, because obviously there'll be people watching this on television, and for myself, to get it straight in my head. So in October 24, Thames arranged a loan with the Class A creditors for £3 billion. I think you said half of that has currently been drawn down. That was from the super senior creditors arranged at a 9.75% interest rate that customers are never going to pay, from what you've said. So in October 24, it was reported that there was an £18.5 million management retention plan, which was agreed as part of that loan agreement for the top 21 executives or staff, including the new CFO and initially the CEO, although I understand that may have changed by April, so that those top 21 staff got 3 times their salary, essentially, in 1 year. And as you said, Sir Adrian, at our last meeting, to try to maintain our most precious resource. Now, there will be people watching who think that maybe the water is a more precious resource, or that some of those water engineers that we discussed last time, when you said there were 700 vacancies for frontline engineers, who only get 3 to 6% bonuses if they're lucky, certainly not 300% in 1 year. So you'll understand why there's been a lot of interest in this particular bonus scheme and the value of it at £18.5 million. So at our last meeting, I mean, my question is going to be who wanted this management retention plan? Because when we last met, you said it was the creditors. You said the lenders insisted. Yeah. Then you wrote to us saying you may have misspoken. Mm-hmm. And then in the later letter, said it was a result of a shared understanding between the board and the creditors. However, the committee, the remuneration committee minutes on the 4th of November last year say that the bondholders are therefore insisting on this. So who wanted that MRP?
I'll bring you in a second, but I think it's important that we hear from Sir Adrian on this first.
So let me deal with a narrow point. So I did say that the creditors were insisting on the MRP, so the Management Retention Plan. There was an echo of that, as you say, in the minutes from early November.
Sorry, Sir Adrian, can you keep your voice up?
There was an echo of what I had said in the minutes from early November.
The corroboration.
Thank you. It's a very nice word. Thank you so much. But actually, following the committee session we had in May, the creditors said, we didn't insist on it. It was in the interest of both sides. And I think that is correct. I think I was...
So the contemporary minutes weren't right?
I'm sure the contemporary minutes reflected the conversation we had. But in reality, both sides wanted a retention plan. And it was an unhappy choice of words to say the creditors insisted on it. It may have been reflected in the minutes, but I think it was in reality an unhappy choice of words. I'm sorry for the confusion. So the company wanted that plan because we need to retain the services of the people who are vital to the restructuring. We had lost 20% of the finance function over the previous year. We need to keep these people happy and working on the business. The creditors also wanted that because they needed to know that the company was properly provided with the right capability to meet their side of these transactions, these negotiations. So it was really in mutual interest. And I think I overemphasised the point when I said they insisted on it.
Can I?
Yes.
Can I make a few comments because there are a number of things in your introduction that are inaccurate. Quite a lot of it is true, but some of it is actually inaccurate. So let me try and sort of piece together what this is. When you look at the chronology of this, the need for a retention plan was put as a requirement in the documents as part of the restructuring plan. We met in November to discuss the overall terms of a restructuring plan, and we didn't reach any conclusions as a remuneration committee. We met then again in March and in April, when in April we made a recommendation to the board to have a retention plan and to set out the detail. In between November and the March meeting, we commissioned additional research to look at the details of the plan. We saw published evidence from Willis Towers Watson on benchmarking of the payments in the plan. We commissioned advice from Mercer's about the terms of the plan, and all these are in.
Have actually got all this in the correspondence.
Yeah, but I think it's important for those who are listening to this to understand the detail.
And it is, but time is money. So if we can maybe get to the answer.
I will get to the answer as quickly as
the existence of the plan
as I can.
Was set out in October and November, that there was going to be one, not the fine detail of it.
Yes, and it was quite important that that was the case because, as Adrian mentions, we'd in the previous financial year lost 20% of our finance team, and actually having key staff knowing that a retention plan was likely to be put in place and that the remuneration committee was discussing it, I think was a helpful thing to do. But we didn't actually agree the plan until the board agreed it in April.
I suppose
my point here is as well that we did a lot of diligence as a committee to look at the fine detail of the plan. We changed the dates of RP2 and of the second tranche of the plan, which and we also introduced clawback provisions within the plan, and we introduced some other details as well to protect the company's position in the case that there might be change. So what I'm trying to say to you is we do need, and we have a real issue here in terms of retaining key people in the business as we go through this really complex transaction that you're all very, very familiar with now. So we need to do something. We made the first payment, and as you know, the way the plan is structured, the first payment was made in April, and as explained in the letter to the chair of this committee, there is due a payment of 50% as well in December, and then a further payment.
Paused. What does that mean?
Yeah, it is paused. We have reflected on the feedback that we have had, and we decided that it was best to actually pause the plan while we reflected and looked at guidance that was coming from Ofwat, and that's
so
what
you paused the plan at a point when you weren't going to be paying from it anyway, but you still reserve the right to open it up again at the end of the year. Is that right?
Well, no decision's been made on restarting.
I didn't ask you if you'd made a decision. You reserve the right to.
I think we should always reserve the right to do things.
Okay, sorry, Jane, I interrupted.
No, that's fine. So I think what we were trying to get at with the initial scope of the plan is that there was a lot of confusion that was over its, first of all, its existence, and then who decided it would happen. Because if a plan like that, it needs to be transparent, because if there were people on the board of the company deciding who may have been impacted by it, then that's maybe something that the bill payers would need to know. And I think, Sir Adrian, it was because of that confusion that we felt it was really necessary to ask whose idea this was and how, and get a proper transparent explanation of how this thing came into being.
Shall I have another go at that? Just to confirm it finally. So, this came into being in the earliest discussions around this famous term sheet. It was dropped into the term sheet. The requirement for management retention plan was dropped into the term sheet in early October. That represented an informal, at this stage, understanding reached with the creditors. The creditors wanted this plan because they want to see a stable management team. We wanted the plan because individually we wanted to keep these people. I mean, if we lose one of these key people, we're going to have to find a replacement. That's 6 months' work, because any person who's worth having will be in employment. We have to winkle them out of employment at 6 months' notice, and then we have to get them up and running. It is hugely disruptive. That's the reason why the plan is there. And it serves both the creditor's interest and the
You can
company's
see
interest.
how difficult that is for people watching to understand. If we're talking about engineers getting 3 to 6% bonuses, and these people coming in and taking 300% in 1 year.
Absolutely.
It isn't 300% in 1 year.
I agree that these are. I agree this is a difficult set of propositions. You know, clearly it's a difficult set of propositions, but it's not paid for by the customers. It's paid for by the lenders. The lenders bear these costs, and the plan was put in place to serve the interests both of the company and of the lenders. Now, you'd be very generous to me in relation to insisting on the plan. I mean, I think came from both sides, and it was seen as in the interests of both the creditors and of the company. No one certainly no non-executive director, including me as a non-executive director, benefited from the plan. And when we took the decisions, the executives were not in the room. We had to rely on the executives to tell us who they thought in the management team were worthy of these bonuses. So it was right that Chris and the people director participated in the discussions because we needed their input, but they did not participate in the decisions.
Why did you decide to keep the whole plan a secret?
We didn't. We had
Because the board minutes say that the potential impact of the Special Measures Act and negative publicity was considered, and that the recipients themselves were asked not to say anything about it.
We believed and continue to believe that the Special Measures Act does not touch these payments. And if you read the offer letter that they've sent to you, I think you'll see why we believe that. But we don't want to rest on that position. Secretary of State has made his views quite clear when he appeared before the committee. I hope the Secretary of State, hope the government will recognise that we have an interest in maintaining continuity of our staff. Indeed, Mr. Ollimore referred to that last time.
So why then not say anything about it?
Because we published it as soon as we got through the decision on the beginning of April.
I think Helena wanted to.
Helena, did you want to come in?
Yeah. Since you've referred to our evidence session last time, Adrian, just to refer back to that, the exchange that we had was about why there was such an emphasis on maintaining the senior leadership and not the junior roles, the frontline roles, the 700 vacancies that Jane has referred to, just to be clear. That's the point I was making. In relation to the management retention plan, many people will look at this and see, particularly when you look at the fact we've been given pages of redacted remuneration committee minutes that look like that this was a deliberate attempt to design a policy that circumvented the new government's regime about banning the water bosses' bonuses.
That's certainly not true, and it's not something I'd ever be associated with. And as Mr. Carmichael knows, and Mr. Gardner as well, throughout all my time as in Parliament and as a government minister, I've always sought to uphold the highest principles, known principles of public life, and I wouldn't be associated with doing something.
It's just a coincidence of timing that you've got the Water Special Measures Act and you design your retention plan in these terms.
And the board minutes say that they were considered.
Well, I think you'd expect that that as a committee we would want to take advice on on the legality of what we're doing, and that's part of a sensible due diligence process that we would want to undertake.
In the 4th of November Remuneration Committee, Sir Adrian, you committed in the discussions that you would speak to Ofwat about the legality of the Management Retention Plan and whether it was in keeping with the Water Special Measures Bill. But when you appeared before our committee and this came into the public domain, Ofwat wrote to us subsequently to say they had had no discussions with you or with Thames about the existence of this plan up to the 13th of May. So why from the 4th of November to the 13th of May did you have no discussions with Ofwat as you had undertaken to your own board colleagues?
Because the plan was not finalised until the end of April.
It couldn't be finalised until you know whether it was legal.
Early in April. But
the shape of it was very clearly taking form in the 4th of November meeting. Ian has just said he would never wish to do anything that circumvented a law, and you gave an undertaking to your board colleagues that you would go and check that with Ofwat. But the reality is that you did not do that for 7 months.
Ofwat has said very recently in their letter to you, they do not regard the plan as impacting people underneath board level, and that the evil that the Act was directed at was bonuses related to performance.
Yeah.
These are not bonuses related to performance.
The scheme as it was designed.
These are bonuses just trying to encourage people not to leave Thames.
The scheme as it was designed on the 4th of November at that point applied to both the CEO and the CFO. So it did cover the individuals targeted by the Water Special Measures Act. Therefore, it would seem very obvious to those looking at this from the outside, this was designed to circumvent that policy, but you actually had no discussions, no due diligence with Ofwat to check that what you were developing. The fact is, if it hadn't come out in this committee, would we even be having this conversation? Would these payments be going ahead? And actually, you didn't just proceed with the design of the plan. You made the first payment on the 30th of April before having any conversations with Ofwat as to the legality. Is that correct?
We did not. Well, our judgment was the plan was not unlawful for the reasons that I've just described to you, and which actually Ofwat has implicitly confirmed in their letter to you.
Well, they've confirmed that if the CEO and the CFO were excluded, but at the point in 4th of November, they were included.
But even if you include those two officials, those two officers of the company, this is not the sort of payment that the Special Measures Act is targeted at.
I think most people out there would say what we were trying to crack down on with the Water Special Measures Bill was money in addition to base salary for poor performance. Whether that is a performance-related pay, whether that is a bonus, most people would see it as extra.
If you will let me answer you, we have paused the plan because the Secretary of State came here in May and said he expected those payments to be withheld. We have not yet had a discussion with the Department or the Secretary of State as to how we are going to resolve our dilemma. Our dilemma is we need to retain the people whose services are very valuable and are targeted by headhunters. We need to retain them to see this restructuring through. That's the dilemma.
But you're saying you're reacting now to that, but had you conducted your own undertaking on the 4th of November to have discussions with Ofwat about the legality of the proposed scheme, it's quite clear that they would have expressed the view that the Secretary of State expressed to us here, and the 30th of April payment probably wouldn't have gone ahead on the basis.
I don't think that's a fair characterisation of things. As Adrian says, what we're trying to do here is retain senior staff. And we're trying to do so and reconcile that with the framework that's been set by DEFRA and by Ofwat and its PRP provision.
Even if you'd known about the Secretary of State's unhappiness, you would have paid the April payments anyway.
Mm-hmm. Well, what I'm saying to you, the payments that were made in April were to senior people in the organisation, below executive
we've
board
got
level.
all that.
So they're not in any way related to Ofwat's PRP prohibition rule or to the Water Special Measures Act. And these are payments to keep people that are in a business as unusual situation, and it is at a critical time for the company as we seek to go through a recapitalisation and probably the biggest debt write-off in UK corporate history.
This moves on nicely to the questions that Josh has in relation to senior executive involvement.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think certainly in the first instance I'd like to address my question to you, Mr Weston. You previously told the committee that you were not part of the Management Retention Plan, but the board minutes reveal that you were previously. So could you tell us when and why you decided to not take part in the plan?
When I answered your question at the committee, it was absolutely the truth at the time. It was sometime before the 17th of April that I decided that I wouldn't participate. I was pleased that the board had expressed that confidence in me, that they would offer it to me, but I felt it would be too much of a distraction, and my number one priority was to make sure I got addressed the stability in my team, where we had seen a number of people leaving over the previous year, and that was not sustainable for the business.
Okay. The minutes also revealed that whilst you were potentially in line for a payment before we withdrew, you were, I quote, involved in shaping the plan, and you were present at all meetings of the Remuneration Committee where the plan was discussed. You didn't just pop in for 20 minutes to give your view and then allow the committee to make their own judgment. You didn't provide your thoughts in writing and then allow the committee to consider that. You were present in all of these meetings. So on that basis, do you share the Chair's confidence that you could act, and I quote, in the best interests of the company without regard to your personal perspective when discussing the size of a bonus that you were potentially in line for?
I do. I did leave the committee, and the committee had ample time at the end of their meetings to consider how it would apply or whether it would apply and what the shape of it would look like and who was participating in the scheme.
Is it not the case that you basically left at the end while the vote was taken and you were present for the vast majority of these meetings?
I was certainly present in the meetings, yes, but there was ample time for the committee to consider the proposition.
And we certainly did, actually. We did discuss, when Chris was out of the room, in some detail the scheme. And as I say, as a committee, over a period of time, we made a number of adjustments to the retention plan as it evolved between November and March.
You will be acutely aware, as we are, that we're in a time where customer satisfaction and confidence is probably at an all-time low. So how do you think that it's appropriate for you to play any part in these discussions, given how that might look?
Well, I have a responsibility to the people in the company, and I felt, it was my judgment, that stability in leadership was absolutely essential, and my number one priority was to provide that stability, and I saw the Management Retention Plan as a key part of enabling that.
Could you not have, for example, as I said, set out your thoughts in a letter so you could explain from your perspective why the plan was necessary, what you thought it should include, but then say, given that I may be in line for this, I'm going to recuse myself from the process? Why did you feel it was necessary for you to actually sit in on those meetings and be part of those discussions around how the plan was shaped?
Well, I think quite understandably the committee had questions about who was in it, and they would appreciate my explanation and support for the people in it and why they were in it.
Yeah, I wanted the Chief Executive to be there to probe on the individuals who were part of the plan to see whether it was whether they were the key people in the business and whether they'd been identified as such. So it's perfectly right that Chris should have been there for part of the discussion, not necessarily all of it, and he wasn't there for all of it.
Well, I think it's clear that he was there for the vast majority of it, but if the plan really is around retaining key people and you eventually came to the judgment that you thought it was inappropriate for you to be part of the plan, why did you not remove yourself from that right at the beginning? So you could say, I've got no vested interest in this at all, let's talk about what this means for the rest of my team. Why did you wait until basically after that process had concluded before you decided to withdraw personally?
Well, I think everyone recognises the situation developed over time and views change over time. And I was acutely aware as it got closer to a decision point that I could give the advice my advice as to who should be in that scheme, but I didn't feel it was appropriate that I should accept it.
And as the non-exec chairing this committee, you know, the non-execs are there to ensure the probity of the process. You not only were happy to have him there, you required him to be there.
I asked him to be there because part of the plan involved identifying who the key individuals were that should be part of the retention plan. And if I can just also sort of make a couple of additional points about the MRP. I mean, firstly, to be clear that this is being paid for by the creditors rather than by customers.
What other income streams have you got apart from customer bills?
We have the Thames Water Super Senior liquidity extension funding. And
the people that you borrow from is not really an income stream, is it?
Well, it is a stream of capital that goes into a bank account out of which the retention payment was made, and there's a clear auditable trail of that.
It's, as they say, water always finds a way through. You'll be familiar with the expression. It always comes back to the customer bills at the end of the day.
Well, no,
in a water company.
No, it won't. It won't in this case, and as is the case with the fees and of advisors, etc.
And the loans that pay themselves back.
The situation is that this will all be part of RP2, the restructuring plan. And it was the courts, I mean, if I could remind you, Mr. Carmichael, it was the courts at RP1 who, and it was the judge who made the decision, and he said that he considered that the customers rather than the creditor would bear the cost of the plan, because he accepted that it was highly likely that they would take a substantial debt write-off during RP2.
Highly likely.
Yeah, and as we've said today, that is becoming increasingly certain, although we don't know the quantum of it as we speak today.
Carry on with your questioning. We've got other colleagues wanting to.
Okay, I think we all know, though, that you can shift money around within the business. So to say that customers are not directly on the line for paying for this plan, for example, isn't really genuine in the round.
To be honest,
a judge says said it in a court that the costs of the plan will be borne by the creditors, and I think that should be good enough as an evidence.
Say creditors' bid is successful.
Yeah. So the haircut will be.
Creditors' bid is successful, then this kind of tortuous route that you're outlining just disappears, and it does come back on the customer's end, doesn't it?
No, it doesn't.
Can I try to help on this? Because I can understand why you say that, Mr. Newbury, but you've got to, I think, apply some logic and some analysis to this.
I'm sorry, can you keep your voice up, please?
I beg your pardon. You've got to be quite sort of analytic about how these cash flows move. So I hope we've satisfied you that the initial source of money for the MRP is the drawings on the credit facility, because we've separated the accounts and we pay the money out of that account. But when we come to our capital reconstruction, we've got all these different categories of debt. I referred earlier on to the need to have a big write-off of the debt. So we're going to have many billions of pounds of debt written off, and in that process, we will produce a company which is sort of creditworthy, lean and meaner, and the amount that the creditors pay for these retention payments will get swept up in that process. There's no cut through to the customer here.
I would just say, though, that I hope that none of your PR people are going to be in this MRP, because I don't think they've done a particularly good job here, I will be honest with you. Because when I was a local councillor, if I ran a business that was bidding for a contract with the council, I wouldn't be able to sit in the meeting, make my case at length, and then just recuse myself at the end when the vote came. I would not be allowed to sit in that meeting at all. and I would not be allowed to be involved in the process at all. And we might be talking about a 5-figure sum there. Clearly, we are talking about much more substantial sums of money here. And I think the appearance of propriety, as I said, when confidence is so low, is really, really important. And I'll just stress that to you, that we can't change the past, but maybe in future, when you're coming to situations like this, it would be appropriate to give your views in a different way, to not sit in the room when discussions are being had, because that raises all sorts of questions, uncomfortable, I'm sure, for you to come here and have to answer today. So that's just one point I would make to you. Chair, can I ask my final couple of questions and then bring other colleagues in? We understand that your new CFO is due to receive a retention payment soon. Now, clearly, when you have a new hire, it's not unusual to have a signing on bonus, for example, but it seems very quaint that you've got a retention payment being given so soon after they've joined. Is it really necessary and considered stability for you to need to give senior members of the organisation significant payouts just to keep them on for a year, for example, and then presumably they may be back for more after that year?
Well, my understanding is that this part of the discussions in us recruiting the new CFO, and it's certainly the case that he will be a key figure for the next 12, 15, 18 months that we go through this process, and we don't know how long it's going to last for, but certainly he wasn't eligible for the first payment. He would not be eligible for the second payment, and it was only the third payment that he would be eligible for. But as we say, we haven't made any decision on restarting the plan at the moment. But we face a real difficulty here of retaining key people, and that's the elephant in the room. And if you look at the advice from Mercer's and for Thames Watson, then it's pretty standard during a restructuring or an M&A situation that you have some form of restructuring plan, and you have some form of management retention plan. Ours is actually quite small in retrospect compared with some others. With Thames Watson figures say 2% of purchase price. Mercer's have got a figure of 0.4%. Our figure, as we replied to the committee chairman, is 0.1%. So it's very much in line with a lot of the benchmarks that are out there. And yes, I'm not tone deaf to this. This is big money, but it's for a purpose, and the purpose is a good one. The purpose is a good one. It's to retain key people in the business during very, very difficult times. And, I just happen to think that this is the right thing to do. If there are other ways of retaining key people, then we will explore them. But at the moment, there's a very real problem here. And we obviously have to operate within the framework set by government, and we will definitely do that. Absolutely, definitely do that. But if there are any other solutions, then that would be of interest to us as a business.
You said, Mr. Pearson, that it's not unusual and you benchmarked it, but I think what we would question is that we are not seeing this level of remuneration in other parts of the water industry. You may be benchmarking yourself against financial institutions, but I'd just like to remind you of the context that Thames Water is delivering a public service. It's not a financial institution. And I think often when most of the discussion we've had today, that point is forgotten, and we're looking at the performance and behaviour of other financial institutions when we're talking about this. The people who come to work for Thames Water are coming to deliver a service to millions of customers, and that should be the basis. And actually, in terms of retaining people, I would say being part of rescuing an enormous flailing institution, that looked pretty good on your CV, and I think that should be a motivation for people. I don't think they should need huge sums of money within a year of joining an organisation to just be able to commit to lasting out the year.
I agree, it's a motivation. would make the point back that we all have husbands and wives back at home that ask questions and say, well, why don't you go and work for somewhere? Why don't you go and work for somebody else that will pay you more? And as I say, retention plans are a common feature in restructurings, and we're not benchmarking against financial services companies here. We're benchmarked against other restructurings, other M&A transactions of a similar nature where plans are put in place.
Not in the water industry.
Well, there haven't been, with the exception of Southern Water recently, many restructurings to take place. And what we do as a normal course of events, as a remuneration policy for Thames Water, is we do benchmark. We benchmark from CEO level right down throughout the organisation. We benchmark at the senior level against other water companies and also against non-financial members of the FTSE 51 to 100. And that's all in our remuneration policy that is part of the very lengthy Director's Remuneration Report that we published today. So we're not comparing ourselves with financial services companies.
There's a lot of people who have extremely difficult jobs under really tough circumstances, but it seems to only be in the water industry where people need these extraordinary payments to be able to commit to a minimal amount of service. I'll just finish with this, if I may. Is it not the case that the worse the state of Thames Water gets, the more excessive the executive pay seems to be becoming?
Yeah.
And where does that end? You know, if the company gets into a worse state in the next couple of years, are you going to be approving even bigger remuneration packages just to try and keep people on board?
I mean, Thames Water is going through extraordinary times. All we're seeking to do here is to try and make sure that we've got a key leadership team and critical people to the transaction that we need to execute to ensure our survival and to keep us out of SAR, stay in the business. That's what we're trying to do. It isn't any more complicated than that. But having said that, that's very complicated.
Any you wanted to come in here? Or are you coming in late?
I'll come in later, it's
Okay.
fine.
Right, we'll move on, Andrew, to the objectives.
Yeah, to be fair, mine will be quite short because Joss has just asked most of that section just now. So I'm quite keen to get into the Afghan statement at 12:30. So I'm just trying to think what questions I'll have to ask.
I don't think there's much that's unimportant here.
So look, I suppose, look, just to recap really, Josh has covered most of it. This is a plan around an £18.5 million pot, which is covering up to 3 times the base salary of the staff included in it.
Over essentially a 2-year period, yeah.
And part of the justification of that, in Sir Adrian's words, is these are staff who are critical to the company, is a description. Who do you think your customers think are critical to the company when it comes to the work of Thames Water? Would it be the top 21 executives, or would it be the person knocking on their door saying they've turned up to fix the leak?
I think that's a very valid point that you make. I mean, what we're trying to solve for here is keeping key people that are important for the recapitalisation process and keeping the business running. We're not trying to do anything more than that. And I just hope that the committee, when it considers this, will recognise the extraordinary circumstances that we're in. And when you're in those sorts of extraordinary circumstances and you're in danger of losing your key people, and that will put in jeopardy the recapitalisation of the business, then it is a sensible, logical thing to do, to seek to put in place measures to mitigate that risk. And that's what we're doing. We have a duty as directors to mitigate the risk that we don't have sufficient management resources. Condition P of our licence from Ofwat compels us to have sufficient management resources. And what the MRP does is it does its best to put in place a scheme that will allow that to happen.
Do you not understand just how frustrated your customers and the taxpayers feel with the language you use, given you're one of the most talked about companies in the country for all of the wrong reasons? Now, in some of the documents, it says one of the justifications for the MRP is there is genuine concern for the welfare of employees in line for the MRP with little annual leave taken and individuals working while supposedly on leave. Are financial payments for staff in that situation the best way to deal with the welfare concerns you've described?
Well, they're certainly not the only way, and as a company, and Chris can explain this in more detail, is we are a good employer and we take our welfare responsibilities incredibly seriously. This is a business, and this is with employees going through a lot of stress at the time, at this point in time. I don't know, Chris, whether you want to say something more about welfare and...
I mean, the first point I'd make is that the amount that is expected of the people in that scheme is, I cannot say how grateful I am for what they're doing. I mean, they are dealing with draft determinations, final determinations, the CMA, an equity process, the due diligence that goes with it, a creditor process. It is a huge demand on their time, and that is on top of transforming and doing their day job. The demands are unbelievable, and we try our best to ensure people take the leave that they are due, and that is absolutely the right solution if we can make it work. But we are in such an intense period, that is not always the case. I do feel the engagement of the people in the company is absolutely paramount, and the leadership style that we adopt within the company tries to ensure that people feel included and are engaged and inspired. We have recently concluded an engagement survey across the whole company. 8,000 people, 6,500 replied to the survey, and I was really pleased to see that since the last time that survey was done 2 years ago, our employee engagement had gone up, and belief in the leadership of the team, of the company, had gone up. And I thought that was quite an achievement in the circumstances that we find ourselves in. So we take engagement extremely seriously, and we are doing our best to manage that in a very, very difficult situation.
And is there a plan for up to 3 times salary for staff at other levels if they have welfare or stress concerns?
So we do have bonus arrangements in place throughout the company. Now it goes all the way down to the front line. It didn't recently. So that was absolutely a deliberate move to try and align everyone to deliver the types of performance that we have to deliver around things like pollutions or leakage. The retention plan was put in place to deal with a very specific situation.
Okay, Helena, will you keep it tight, because we
just
really are.
briefly on this point about the importance of retaining the senior management team versus the importance of retaining the junior frontline staff doing the work of fixing the pipes. The remuneration committee minutes, they contain this reference to concern about the welfare of senior staff. Have there been any discussions at the remuneration committee about the welfare and the retention of junior frontline staff? Because I couldn't see any.
So retention of frontline staff is something that is considered, I mean, right up to board level and certainly executive. So we will look at the level, the percentage of people that leave the company, what you would call churn. Or attrition. It's quite good at the moment given the circumstances. It's about 5 to 7% at the front line, which I think is good for, and particularly for a company in the circumstances that Thames is in.
Welfare of those staff?
Well, the welfare of their staff is taken very, very seriously. I have leaders throughout the company, and we have been investing in and developing those leaders. We're very mindful of all the obligations we have around health and safety and hours worked and all the rest of it to ensure that they are looked after appropriately.
So just on that point, and I refer the House to my register of interests, the biggest union that represents Thames Water staff is the GMB. And they've written to us to say that there was widespread disbelief when the chairman described senior managers as the company's greatest asset. They've also said that industrial relations are poor. There have been no discussions with the unions regarding the Price Review 24 operational or workforce plans, nor on skills and training, and we talk about those 700 vacancies. If this is so important, why haven't you talked to the biggest union representing Thames Water staff about it?
We meet very regularly with all of the unions, and my executive meet very regularly. I met with the unions 6 weeks ago or so to update them on the situation. We are investing a huge amount in the skill of our staff, bringing in apprentices, graduates.
They don't feel that way, and they feel that actually the impact of the evidence session last time was dismay and disbelief and not motivating the people they represent.
And we're also increasing our training budget, and we have built that into the budget for the next 5 years, dramatically increased it and reinstated it from when it was cut 2 years or so ago, because it is so important to our front line and helping them do the job that we're asking them to do.
Jean, and then I promise I will come to you.
Just very quickly, because I mean, we know that Thames Water has been in difficulty for a long time. It's not only the staff at the top who feel it and get grief. It's the staff who are going out meeting people day after day. So I think when Helen is talking about, we're talking about training needs, etc., it's also an acceptance of what's happening on the ground and how difficult it is for those people who are going out facing people every day and are, they're having a hard time of it.
Yeah, until last September, I also led for the board on workforce engagement, and that involved me sort of getting out and about and talking to people on the front line right across London and the Thames Valley. And the overwhelming impressions that I got from that experience were people were concerned. They're concerned about the public comments about Thames. They're concerned about their jobs, but they were just getting on with it, and they had some confidence that management would see it.
But getting on with it without a 300% bonus, it's different, isn't it?
Yeah, and the other overwhelming thing that came across to me was the sort of actual pride to work for Thames Water, and the fact that they really were annoyed at the fact that the public didn't understand the importance of the job that they were doing. And, these are the people day-to-day mending leaks, day-to-day doing major capital works across the business, and just that sort of sheer sense of frustration, which I often feel as well as a non-executive director. I can show you all the 99 things that are good that Thames does, and then there's the one thing that hits the news and it's terrible.
There was something you could do about it.
Just very quickly, because
I think in politics you probably get that, yeah.
I just one last question. You said that you led on workforce engagement till last year. Who is it currently leading on workforce engagement?
Catherine Lynn. Yeah, I took over the Remco, and Catherine took over my role doing workforce engagement.
Okay. Josh, then Jenny.
Thank you. Ian, you just mentioned that sort of pride in the organisation and a feeling that perhaps the good work of Thames wasn't recognised is an important part of sort of motivation and morale at work for frontline members of staff, and that's one of the things that's keeping them in their job. Why is that then not the case for the likes of the CFO? Why do people at the very top of the organisation not share that pride and not share that motivation to perhaps highlight the good work of Thames Water as part of their role, and for that to keep them motivated? Why do they need 300% bonuses then for them that the frontline staff are not going to be receiving? I think there's immense
pride at all levels of the organisation. I am very proud to work for Thames. I know my team are. And a lot of the people that join because what we do really matters, and they find that inspirational. The retention plan was put there for a different reason. It was put there because we are operating in a competitive market. These people are demonstrating every single day how capable they are, and they are being asked to go above and beyond what their day job is, quite considerably and for a prolonged period of time. And so I want to take away that risk.
Order. I'm sorry, can you take your seat or can you leave the room, please?
Leaving. I'd like to thank you all for being here.
carry on, please.
Yeah, well, were you done, Chris? I just wanted to say also that if we'd decided to do nothing and we'd have lost half, 2/3 of our senior leadership team, I'm pretty sure that you'd have invited us back to say, why did you do this? Why didn't you take any action?
You've not had a great record on retaining them.
That's true, and you know, the people in the senior leadership currently in the business aren't the people who created the problems that Thames is facing. They're the people who are there to fix those problems, and we want to make sure they stay
You
there.
obviously haven't done a great job of retaining your frontline staff either, because you've told us you've got 700 vacancies for engineers, for example. And why is it that it is 100 times as important to retain somebody at the top of the organisation? And you've said, you know, they have a lot of demands on their time, they have to go above and beyond. Are they really going 100 times above and beyond as somebody on the front line who is, you know, keeping things running on a day-to-day basis? That's the point we're trying to get at here, is you seem to value people at the top of the organisation far, far more. And it doesn't matter that other organisations you're benchmarked against are doing this too. We constantly hear this on this committee, that, well, everybody else is doing it, so we've got to. Well, I'm sorry, but there are other organisations that, you know, that also respect their frontline staff, and it feels like you're really not focusing on that, as Helena said. That hasn't been a feature of the discussion at Remuneration Committee at all. But yet you've got all these vacancies.
Well, we do focus on our frontline staff, and that's what Chris and the business is all about. Because if it isn't for our frontline staff, then things don't get done. But the simple fact of the matter is, you'd be criticising us if we had a flight of top executives, and we have a responsibility as directors to mitigate the risk of some senior people leaving the business during a big recapitalisation process, and it keeps coming back to that in the end. If you don't do anything, would you be prepared to say, well, I didn't think there was a risk here, or I actually think there is a risk that some critical people leave, and I think we have to do something about it, which is why we wanted to put in place a management retention plan in the first place.
So there are 700 vacancies within the organisation. They're not all at the front line. About 2.5 years ago, decisions were made by the leadership that they should cut costs and reduce headcount, and I think you talked about that with them at the time here in the Select Committee. When I came in, it became very evident that we were short of people, and we started recruiting. And so we turned the corner from a low number of about 7,700 last March, and we're now at about we're over 8,300 now. So we've brought in 500 or 600 people. There are particular skills that I am very worried about, and we're redoubling efforts to try and bring in more skilled people. But we still have to recruit over the next few years more than that 700 vacancies.
And are any of those people going to get a retention bonus within their first year to stay in their role?
It's not a bonus, it's a retention payment.
Retention payment. Are any of these new staff going to get a retention payment to keep them in their roles?
No, because it's addressing a different problem.
Because they're not executives, that's the only difference that I can tell.
It's not that they're not executives. In determining who went into the retention plan, I was very aware of the criticality of the individual to the operations, where one individual can have a big impact on the operations if we lose them, and the additional workload that was being placed on them because of the circumstances that we find ourselves in at the moment. And these are talented people who are very marketable, and we are operating in a competitive market.
Well, I would be very depressed if I was a frontline worker at Thames Water about some of the things you've said, to be honest, about how valued people at the top are versus people on the front line.
I think that is mischaracterising it. The people that work in Thames across the whole company are extremely valuable to the company, and I respect the job that they do, and I'm very proud of the job they do.
Right, okay. I think we've probably taken this, sadly, as far as we can. Jenny, you're going to ask some questions on the impact on investment.
Indeed, thank you, Chair. I need to put on record that in 2021, Thames Water were a client of mine. I supported them through the chaos of the London flooding. Trust then was appalling, and I think it's got considerably worse since. How do you think today's gone? Do you think you've gone any way to restore some of that trust?
Well, I'm probably a bit of an old hand at this, so let me restart. I think trust is a very scarce commodity everywhere. I don't think politicians are trusted. I don't think business leaders are trusted. It's very difficult to find somebody outside, maybe one or two football players, that actually have any sort of trust in terms of what they say. So I wouldn't have high expectations that after one select committee meeting, everybody's going to suddenly turn around and trust Thames Water, because it just doesn't work like that. What I would like to think is that you as a committee would believe that we have tried to answer your questions in an open and transparent way, the best way that we can. You might not like some of the answers. We might not like some of the things that we've had to do as a business. But the reality is that, we are where we are, and we're trying to sort it out.
So I'd put it to you that I think you fundamentally misunderstand some of the public concerns against Thames Water. And I think the discussion that we've just heard about remuneration, about investment, about where your retention bonuses are, which pots they're paid from, about how you make decisions in committees that Chris, the Chief Executive, is involved in, fundamentally fails to understand the level of frustration that the public have towards Thames Water. And I would say that if you are on any journey towards restoring trust, you have to fundamentally tackle the root causes of why trust in Thames Water is so low. When you have record rates of pollution levels, when you are paying, and I don't mean to point this at you, Ian, but when you said off the cuff, there are husbands and wives that expect these salaries to be maintained, or the words to that effect, you are fundamentally failing to understand the concerns that people have in a business that is letting down the environment, letting down their customers, and fundamentally not operating in a manner that the public would expect a public good to be delivered. That until you sort out these points about remuneration, you will never be able to challenge or rebuild any element of trust in your organisation.
Hear what you say, but at the end of the day, what ultimately will restore the trust is the operations of the company improving. And that is going to take time, and it's going to take investment. And I would argue that we have comprehensive plans in place to do that. And those plans need time to come to fruition. And they will, over time, improve the performance of the company and meet the expectations of our customer, and they will improve the impact on the environment. That's the fundamental thing that needs to be fixed.
So we can talk about that. So this morning you've obviously released your annual report, and in that annual report you put out a press release saying that it's going to be a 10-year plan for Thames Water for recovery. At least a 10-year turnaround plan. Does that I assume, and correct me, and I appreciate we need to be concise because the time is running away with us, but I assume that at least 10-year plan is a consequence of record-breaking financial results in the wrong direction, and therefore you're going to have to elongate your investment plan over at least 10 years. So where is the hit on your investment plan as a consequence of record debt and record poor financial performance, record poor you're in an infrastructure crisis, you've got a pollution crisis, your pollution numbers, incident reports are going up, and your debt is higher than it's ever been before. So I assume that the 10-year turnaround programme for investment is a consequence of that failure.
It's not the consequence of last year, it's the consequence of the last 2 decades of underinvestment in Thames Water's infrastructure. And we have an extensive and aged infrastructure. On the waste side alone, there are about 120,000 kilometres of network that we have to clean, look after and replace. So the 10-year turnaround reflects the current state of the infrastructure and our asset base. And that performance over the last 10 years has also led to a balance sheet that is not sustainable. And that is why we're having to go through this recapitalisation. But going hand in glove with that has to be the turnaround and the transformation of the operations of the company.
Is what within the 5-year view is being kicked to the long grass to a 10-year investment programme as a consequence of today's annual report announcements?
Today's announcement around our results has no impact on whether we move investments from the first 5 years to the second 5 years.
Okay. The fact is that some of these things just take time. When I was a member of this House and Climate Change and Environment Minister in 2006, I green-lighted the Thames Tideway Tunnel. It's now operational now, 19 years later. Big infrastructure takes a long time frame. We believe, and we've consistently said this for a number of years, that we need more water resources. We can do as much as we can on leakage, but we still need more water resources. We're hoping that we'll be able to get approval to build a reservoir in around about 2036 by if we get a crack on, but it could well be later than that. But you know, there are big decisions that the water sector needs to take. Actually, it isn't just Thames, which is why I personally very much welcome Cunliffe and what the Cunliffe Commission has been saying, and look forward to the final report, because if some things aren't changed and the current situation persists, it's not just going to be Thames that gets in trouble, it's going to be other water companies that get in trouble as well. And maybe that's a sort of a wider point, but it's something that I think the committee at some point will want to consider.
I know that I don't mean to go back to the rumination, but I am going to briefly go back. So so you said that the pocket of money that it comes out of isn't customer bills; it's out of a separate revenue stream, which effectively could be written off under certain circumstances. If you are renationalised, are we saying now that your bonuses are being paid out of future taxpayers' money? So you're front-loading a loan from government if you were to be renationalised, but government would be paying your bonuses.
We're talking about a retention plan.
Yeah, so your retention.
Bonuses.
Yeah. So let's call it that, the retention plan.
And as part of the retention plan, it will go into a restructuring plan, and that will affect the size of the debt write-off. Yeah. And it's pretty small in comparison with the other debts that are going to be written off. In a SAR situation, this isn't even an accounting error compared with what would happen under a SAR.
Long story short, it sounds like the answer is yes.
Well, if I understood the question said, would the costs of this in SAR be borne by
the taxpayer?
The taxpayer renationalisation.
And Mr. Carmichael has already said that the cost of the taxpayer of SAR is zero, therefore.
No, I didn't say. I offered you the example of others who have said that by the time it came out it would be zero. But
we're potentially talking about public money paying for.
The thing to understand about SAR is this isn't an end point; it's just a staging point, and Thames's creditors will still have rights under a SAR regime. There will still need to be a recapitalisation programme under a SAR regime, and there'll still need to be a debt write-off. So my view would be it just gets written off.
Okay. Finally.
And that's pension fund money, as well as Elliott money, as well as.
Understood. Finally, so the big news today was your annual report, obviously the committee, but thirdly that you've got a hosepipe ban that's been announced, but you've also had too much rain, hence why in the annual report you talk about an increase in pollution incidents because there has been too much rain, but equally there's a hosepipe ban because there's not enough rain. How do you respond to that? Which of those is true? And where does the truth lie?
Well, they're both true, actually. So we had a very wet year last year. Ground level water levels were very high, and that creates all sorts of problems for our network and leads to pollutions. But unfortunately, we have also had almost the driest spring in history since records began. And one of the reasons why we have limited the hosepipe ban to the Swindon-Oxford area is because London at the moment is still relatively well served by the aquifers that were overfull during the winter. They are still serving London. Doesn't mean we shouldn't be prudent, but they are still serving London, and there's no hosepipe ban in London. The aquifers further west have not fared so well, and those aquifers don't only provide water to the population around Swindon and Oxford, but they also provide water to the Thames. They are one of the sources of the Thames. And the levels in the Thames are now very low and are having to be managed quite carefully. And that does make it more difficult for us to abstract water from the Thames and keep our reservoirs topped up. And the predominant effect is in the west of our area. We are not alone in this. There are other problems around the country where hosepipe bans have had to be put in place, and indeed in Europe. I think Spain, France and Ireland are all suffering similar issues because of the very, very dry spring that we've had. I mean, leakage is a problem that we're wrestling with every single day. I have to say it is lower than it has ever been at the moment. In 2022, the last time we had a drought, the backlog of leaks to be repaired was over 7,000. It is now about 600, which is about a week's work for the workforce. We do about 650 repairs every single week. And there are other measures we've taken. We've installed over 1 million smart meters, and we will install another 1.2 million. That helps us in detecting leaks at customers' premises so we can fix them and save water. And we're also improving the technology that we're putting into the network to try and find leaks, acoustic sensors. We've deployed 40,000 and we'll deploy up to 100,000 by the end of 2027. So there's a lot of work going on around managing water supply. We have been planning for a water shortage since we started to see the issues with a dry spring, and we have a plan that's agreed with the EA that is a drought management plan that we are executing.
Thank you.
Okay, gentlemen, I think that concludes our questions for you this afternoon. Just before I conclude the proceedings formally, though, I think I must just give you an opportunity to reflect on the evidence you've given. If there has been any misspeaking, this would be a good time to tell me so that we can rely on what we have heard from you today. Okay.
Not aware of anything that I've said that...
Right, in which case we shall take you at your word on that. As I indicated to you at the top, the committee will now consider what further actions we may wish to take. But we are grateful to you for your attendance and your somewhat prolonged appearance this morning and this afternoon. But I conclude proceedings for the committee today. Order.